Good day, lovely viewers. Welcome to Dark Fanfics. We have an exciting story lined up for you today. What if Fleur's Veela magic claimed Harry during the second task and she refused to let anyone near him? Your engagement means the world to us. Like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow and bring you more amazing content. Without wasting any time, let's start. Chapter 1. The claiming. The February air bit through Harry's robes as he stood at the edge of the Black Lake, his breath forming misty clouds that dissipated in the weak morning light. All around him, excited chatter rose from the stands erected along the shore, hundreds of students bundled against the winter chill as they awaited the second task of the Triwizard Tournament. "You're sure the gillyweed will work?" Harry asked Neville for what must have been the 10th time that morning, his fingers nervously turning the slimy plant matter in his pocket. "Positive," Neville replied, though his voice wavered slightly. "Professor Moody seemed certain when he suggested I help you with it." Harry nodded, attempting to look more confident than he felt. The cryptic egg's message still echoed in his mind, "We've taken what you'll sorely miss." What had they taken? Who? His stomach twisted with anxiety. Nearby, Fleur Delacour paced along the shoreline, her silvery blonde hair whipping in the wind. Even in her concerned state, she carried herself with the natural grace that seemed to follow her everywhere. Harry noticed how her gaze kept drifting toward the water's depths, her normally composed features tight with worry. "Champions!" Dumbledore's magically amplified voice cut through the noise. "Take your positions." Harry lined up alongside Cedric, Victor, and Fleur. The Beauxbatons champion gave him a brief, distracted glance before turning her attention back to Dumbledore, who explained the task to the assembled crowd. "An hour to recover what has been taken," the headmaster concluded, his blue eyes twinkling despite the gravity of his words. When Bagman's whistle pierced the air, Harry shoved the gillyweed into his mouth, forcing himself to chew and swallow the revolting substance as he waded into the freezing water. The transformation was sudden and painful, his neck splitting open to form gills, his hands and feet elongating into webbed appendages. With one final look at the receding shoreline, he plunged beneath the surface. The underwater world of the Black Lake unfolded before him, murky, mysterious, and far more vast than it appeared from above. Harry propelled himself forward, encountering swaying forests of weeds and the occasional curious Grindylow. Time seemed different down here, stretching and compressing in disorienting ways. How much of his hour had passed? 20 minutes? 30? After what felt like an eternity of swimming, the haunting melody of merpeople singing reached his ears, drawing him toward what must be their village. As he approached, crude stone dwellings came into view, and merpeople with grayish skin and wild green hair watched him with yellow eyes. In the village square, Harry's heart nearly stopped. Tied to a massive statue of a merperson were 4 figures, suspended in enchanted sleep: Hermione, Cho Chang, a small girl with silvery hair who could only be related to Fleur, and Ron. "We've taken what you'll sorely miss." The egg's riddle suddenly made terrible sense. Harry swam closer, drawing his wand as merpeople circled him cautiously. He considered the 4 hostages. Cho was clearly meant for Cedric, Hermione for Crumb, the small girl for Fleur, and Ron for himself. After checking that all 4 were breathing, Harry looked around for the other champions. Cedric appeared suddenly from the gloom, his head encased in a large bubble. He quickly cut Cho free with a severing charm and gave Harry a thumbs up before swimming away. Minutes later, Crumb arrived, his half-transfigured shark head making precise spellwork difficult as he attempted to free Hermione. But where was Fleur? Harry waited, treading water, but as the minutes ticked by with no sign of the Beauxbatons champion, unease settled in his gut. Something had gone wrong. The little silver-haired girl remained tied to the statue, her face peaceful in enchanted sleep, unaware of her sister's absence. Making a swift decision, Harry aimed his wand at Ron's bindings. The merpeople didn't interfere. But when he turned toward the little girl, several trident-wielding guards surged forward. "Only your own," one snarled in a screechy, above-water voice. "Fleur's not coming," Harry tried to explain, though his words emerged as nothing more than bubbles. "I can't leave her." The Merchiftanus regarded him with calculating yellow eyes. "Your task is to retrieve your own friend. Leave the others." Harry's indignation flared. Tournament rules be damned, he wasn't leaving a child at the bottom of a lake. Raising his wand threateningly, he gestured at the mere people, who reluctantly backed away. He quickly severed the girl's bindings, grabbed her around the waist with one arm, and took Ron with the other. The return journey was grueling. The two bodies dragged at his arms, his webbed feet kicked frantically against the water's resistance, and his lungs began to burn as the gillyweed's effects waned. Just when Harry thought they wouldn't make it, his head broke the surface, and he gasped in life-giving air. Ron sputtered awake immediately. "Bloody hell, that's cold." Together they helped the still unconscious little girl toward the shore. The crowd roared as they emerged from the water, steam rising from their soaked clothes in the frigid air. Harry's legs trembled as he half-carried, half-dragged the small girl onto the beach. "Gabrielle! Gabrielle!" Fleur Delacour came running toward them, her face pale and scratched, her robes torn. She had clearly encountered trouble during her attempt. When she reached them, she fell to her knees beside her sister, who was now stirring groggily. "She is alive. She is unharmed." Fleur's accent was thicker than usual, her voice trembling with emotion. "She's fine," Harry assured her, teeth chattering from the cold. Fleur looked up at him, her blue eyes swimming with tears. "You saved her. Even though she was not your hostage to save." Before Harry could respond, Madame Pomfrey descended upon them, wrapping them in thick blankets and forcing pepper-up potion down their throats. Steam gushed from Harry's ears as warmth flooded his body. He watched as Fleur cradled her sister, whispering to her in rapid French. The judges were conferring near the edge of the water. Dumbledore was speaking with the Merchiftanus, who had emerged specifically to give her account of the underwater events. Percy Weasley hovered anxiously near Ron, fussing over his younger brother despite Ron's obvious embarrassment. "Harry!" Hermione's voice cut through the commotion as she pushed her way toward him, her bushy hair plastered to her head. "You didn't take the task literally, did you? Dumbledore wouldn't have let any of us drown." "Hard to rationalize that when you're staring at unconscious people tied underwater," Harry replied, still shivering despite the blanket and potion. A shadow fell across them. Fleur had approached, Gabrielle's small hand clasped tightly in hers. "I want to thank you properly," she said, her expression intense in a way Harry hadn't seen before. "It's nothing, really," he began, but Fleur cut him off by bending down and kissing him on each cheek. The moment her lips touched his skin, something extraordinary happened. A warm, golden glow emanated from the point of contact, spreading outward like ripples in water. Fleur froze, her eyes widening in shock, then alarm. The glow intensified, enveloping both Harry and Fleur in a soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from within Fleur herself. "Non," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Ce n'est pas possible." Around them, conversations died as people noticed the strange phenomenon. Even the judges paused their deliberations to stare. The golden light turned silver, then a pearlescent white that reminded Harry of phoenix feathers. Fleur's normally beautiful features shifted subtly, her eyes taking on an avian intensity, her posture becoming both graceful and predatory. When she spoke again, her voice carried an otherworldly resonance. "Mine to protect. Mine to guard." Her hand, no longer entirely human but tipped with delicate talons, reached for Harry with possessive gentleness. Harry stood transfixed, unable to move as the strange magic washed over him. It felt like being wrapped in sunlight, warm, secure, but somehow binding. "Miss Delacour." Madame Maxime strode forward, her massive form casting shadows over them. "Control yourself immediately." The half-giantess reached for her student, but before her hand could make contact, Fleur whirled around with shocking speed. A low, melodic hiss escaped her throat, a sound no human should be capable of making. Stay back, she warned, positioning herself between Harry and the Beauxbatons headmistress. He is under my protection now. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances while Gabrielle stared at her sister with wide, knowing eyes. What's happening? Harry finally managed to ask, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. Dumbledore approached cautiously, his wand not drawn but his hand positioned to access it quickly. Miss Delacour, he said gently, I believe you're experiencing a Veela claiming response. Are you aware of what's happening? Fleur's stance remained protective, but awareness flickered in her eyes. Yes. I feel it. He saved Gabrielle when I could not. He risked himself for my family. Her voice softened. The ancient magic has recognized him as worthy. Be that as it may, Dumbledore continued, maintaining his distance, Harry is my student and under my protection at Hogwarts. We must discuss this development calmly. Fleur's posture tensed again. Non. You do not understand. The claiming has begun. To separate us now would be. She struggled for words. Dangerous. Painful. Murmurs swept through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Harry could pick out phrases like Veela magic and dark creature influence amid the rising tide of voices. Harry, Hermione whispered urgently from several feet away, not daring to come closer given Fleur's protective stance. Veela can form magical bonds when they or their families are rescued from peril. It's an ancient protection magic. I read about it in Magical Mediterranean Water Creatures. And that means what exactly? Harry asked, still feeling the warm, golden sensation spreading through him. It means she's magically claimed you as her mate, Ron blurted out, his ears reddening. Bloody hell, Harry. Only you could accidentally get yourself magically betrothed during a tournament task. That's not quite accurate, Ron, Hermione hissed. It's more complicated than, everyone back. Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the chaos as she pushed through the crowd, her tartan robes billowing. Give them space. Mr. Potter, are you all right? Before Harry could answer, Fleur shifted to block McGonagall's approach, her movements fluid and unnaturally quick. Professor, please, Harry called over Fleur's shoulder. I'm fine. Just, confused. McGonagall halted, assessing the situation with a practiced eye. Miss Delacour, I understand Veela magic is involuntary, but you must try to regain control. Mr. Potter needs medical attention after his ordeal in the lake. I will care for him, Fleur insisted, her accent thicker than usual. No one else approaches. The impasse might have continued indefinitely if not for little Gabrielle, who tugged at her sister's wet robes and spoke in rapid French. Whatever she said caused Fleur to soften slightly, though she maintained her position between Harry and the others. Harry, Fleur said without turning, are you truly well? Did the lake harm you? I'm fine, he assured her. But Fleur, what's happening? Why won't you let anyone near me? The Veela magic within me has recognized you as my protector, she explained, her voice both tender and fierce. When you saved Gabrielle, you proved yourself worthy of the sacred bond. Now I must protect you in return. It is, instinctive. Overwhelming. She finally turned to face him, her blue eyes luminous with magic. I cannot stop it, even if I wish to. Dumbledore exchanged meaningful glances with Madame Maxime. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the privacy of my office, rather than before the entire school. Fleur nodded stiffly. But only you and Madame. No others. Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley are Harry's closest friends, Dumbledore noted gently. Would you permit them to accompany us? Fleur assessed Ron and Hermione with that strange, avian intensity. After a long moment, she gave a single sharp nod. They may come, but they will keep their distance. As they made their way toward the castle, the crowd parted before them like water around stones. Harry felt hundreds of eyes following their progress, and whispers trailed in their wake. Fleur walked so close to his side that her arm brushed against his with each step, and he noticed that her nails, while no longer talon-like, remained slightly elongated and pearlescent. "Is this permanent?" he whispered to her. "The initial claiming is," she replied softly. "But its expression can be moderated with time and will. I apologize for frightening you, Harry. I did not expect this to happen." "You didn't exactly ask for my permission," he pointed out, trying to keep his tone light despite his unease. Fleur's expression faltered. "The magic did not ask my permission either. When our skin touched and I felt my gratitude for Gabrielle's life, something ancient awakened." Her voice dropped lower. "My grandmother warned me this could happen, but I thought it was just old tales." Their unusual procession, Harry and Fleur at the center, flanked by Dumbledore and Madame Maxime, with Ron and Hermione following at a careful distance, attracted stares from everyone they passed in the corridors. By the time they reached the stone gargoyle guarding the headmaster's office, Harry felt as though he might suffocate under the weight of attention. "Fizzing whiz-bee," Dumbledore said, and the gargoyle leapt aside, revealing the moving spiral staircase beyond. Inside the circular office, with its whirring silver instruments and portraits of previous headmasters, all suspiciously awake and attentive, Harry finally felt he could breathe again. Fawkes the Phoenix trilled softly from his perch, his crimson and gold plumage luminous in the afternoon light filtering through the high windows. To Harry's surprise, Fleur relaxed slightly in the Phoenix's presence. "Beautiful creature," she murmured, some of the predatory tension leaving her posture as she looked at the magical bird. "Indeed," Dumbledore agreed, moving behind his desk. "Phoenixes and Veela share distant kinship through fire magic, though they express it quite differently." Madame Maxime lowered herself carefully into a reinforced chair that Dumbledore conjured with a flick of his wand. "We must discuss the implications of what has occurred, Albus. A Veela claiming has not been documented in an educational setting for over 2 centuries. "Documented being the operative word," Dumbledore replied mildly. "I suspect such events occur more frequently than wizarding records admit." He turned his attention to Fleur. "Miss Delacour, perhaps you could explain to Harry what this claiming entails. He deserves to understand what has happened to him." Fleur, who had positioned herself slightly in front of Harry's chair, nodded. "The Veela claiming is an ancient protection magic," she began, her voice steadier now. "When a Veela or her blood kin is saved from death by someone worthy, the magic can form a bond between them. It recognizes selfless protection and rewards it with the same." "Rewards?" Harry questioned. "By forcing you to guard me like I'm in constant danger." "The initial claiming is intense," she admitted. "For the first few days, I will feel compelled to keep you safe from perceived threats. As the bond settles, that compulsion will become more manageable." "And what does this bond mean for Harry?" Hermione asked from her position near the door, careful to maintain the distance Fleur had demanded. Fleur's eyes narrowed slightly at the question, but she answered nonetheless. "It means he carries my protection. Veela magic will shield him from certain harms. He may find himself more resistant to enchantments meant to control or mislead. And" she hesitated, "he will be recognized by other magical beings as being under Veela protection." "There are deeper implications as well," Madame Maxime interjected, her accent as pronounced as Fleur's. "Historically, such claims often led to more permanent attachments." Harry's face heated. "You mean like marriage?" "Not necessarily," Dumbledore said quickly, his eyes twinkling despite the seriousness of the situation. "The claiming itself does not constitute a binding marriage contract. It is, at its heart, a protection spell, albeit a complex one with profound magical and social implications." "My family will need to be informed," Fleur said. "Especially my grandmother. She will know how to help me manage the bond's initial intensity." "I've taken the liberty of sending an owl to your parents already," Madame Maxime informed her. "I expect they will arrive tomorrow morning." "And in the meantime?" Ron asked, speaking up for the first time since they'd entered the office. Harry can't exactly go about his normal routine with Fleur hissing at anyone who comes near him. Mr. Weasley raises a valid point, McGonagall said, having joined them in the office after dealing with the remaining tournament matters. The practical considerations must be addressed immediately. Dumbledore steepled his fingers, looking thoughtful. Miss Delacour, would you permit Harry to sleep in his dormitory if we ensured additional protective enchantments? Fleur's jaw tightened. I would prefer to guard him myself. Which would be highly inappropriate in a school setting, McGonagall stated firmly. What about the room of requirement? Harry suggested suddenly, remembering Dobby's description of the magical room. It becomes whatever the user needs. Couldn't it turn into a space where both Fleur and I could stay safely but, separately, until this initial phase passes? Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. An excellent suggestion, Harry. I'm rather impressed you know of the room. It's not commonly found in Hogwarts, a history. He glanced at Hermione, who looked surprisingly nonplussed. What's the room of requirement? She asked, confirming she hadn't been the source of Harry's knowledge. A most accommodating magical space on the 7th floor, Dumbledore explained. And yes, I believe it could serve admirably for our current predicament. Fleur considered the proposal. This room, it would allow me to remain close to Harry while respecting proper boundaries. Precisely, Dumbledore confirmed. The room understands intent rather marvelously. If you both enter with the clear intent of finding appropriate accommodations that satisfy both protection and propriety, it should provide exactly that. Then I agree, Fleur said, though her posture suggested reluctance to accept any solution she hadn't devised herself. What about classes? Hermione pressed. And meals? Harry can't miss his education because of this, and Fleur has her own studies. One step at a time, Miss Granger, Dumbledore advised. The claiming's intensity will diminish in the coming days. Until then, we can arrange for private tutoring and meals to be delivered. And the tournament? Harry asked suddenly. There's still the third task. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. It was Madame Maxime who finally addressed the elephant in the room. The tournament committee will need to be consulted, she said heavily. Never before have two champions become magically linked during the competition. It creates complications. Complications meaning what? Ron asked bluntly. Meaning, McGonagall explained with characteristic directness, that if Miss Delacour's primary magical imperative is now to protect Mr. Potter, she may no longer be able to compete against him in good faith. And conversely, the claiming may affect Mr. Potter's ability to compete independently. Harry felt a surge of frustration. So after everything, dragons, golden eggs, nearly drowning, I might be disqualified because of magic I didn't even choose. No one is being disqualified yet, Dumbledore assured him. Barty Crouch and Ludo Bagman will need to consult the ancient tournament rules. There may be precedent we're unaware of. There is another immediate concern, Madame Maxime added. The reaction of the student body, particularly those with prejudice against Veela or part-humans. Fleur stiffened at this, her hands curling into fists. Let them try something, she murmured, and for a moment, Harry thought he saw tiny flames dancing between her fingers. Which is precisely why we must proceed with caution and discretion, McGonagall said sharply. Inflaming existing prejudices will help no one. Dumbledore rose from his desk. I believe we've discussed enough for now. Harry and Fleur have both experienced tremendous magical strain today. Rest should be our immediate priority. He turned to Harry. I will personally escort you both to the room of requirement and ensure it's properly configured for your needs. As they prepared to leave, Ron caught Harry's eye. We'll bring your things up later, mate. Anything specific you want from the dormitory? My invisibility cloak, Harry replied automatically, then wondered if that was wise to mention in front of the professors. To his relief, Dumbledore merely looked amused rather than concerned. An excellent precaution, the headmaster remarked. Though I dare say Miss Delacour's current heightened senses would make it difficult for anyone to approach you undetected, visible or not. The journey to the 7th floor was mercifully free of student encounters, as most were still down by the lake or in their common rooms discussing the dramatic conclusion to the second task. When they reached the blank wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy attempting to teach trolls ballet, Dumbledore instructed them on how to access the room. Walk past this section of wall 3 times, concentrating on exactly what you need, he explained. Be specific in your thoughts, safe accommodation that honors both the claiming bond and proper boundaries. Harry and Fleur exchanged glances before beginning the process. As they completed the 3rd pass, an ornate door materialized in the previously blank stone. I shall leave you to explore your temporary accommodations, Dumbledore said. House elves will bring meals at regular intervals, and your friends may visit, with Miss Delacour's permission, of course. His blue eyes twinkled momentarily. I suggest you use this time to learn about each other. Magical bonds, even unexpected ones, tend to flourish best with mutual understanding. With that slightly enigmatic advice, he departed, leaving Harry and Fleur standing before the mysterious door. Shall we? Harry asked, gesturing toward the handle. Fleur nodded, still maintaining her protective position slightly in front of him. After you, but I will enter first to ensure it is safe. Harry bit back a comment about the room's magical nature making such precautions unnecessary. The fierce determination in Fleur's eyes suggested logical arguments wouldn't sway her Veela instincts. The room of requirement had outdone itself. Beyond the door lay a spacious suite divided into distinct areas. A comfortable sitting room with a crackling fireplace occupied the center, flanked by 2 separate bedroom chambers with their own bathrooms. The decor struck a balance between Hogwarts' Gothic aesthetic and the lighter, airier style Harry had glimpsed of Beauxbatons through the visiting carriage's windows. Most impressively, one wall featured a large window-like enchantment that seemed to look out over both the Hogwarts grounds and, somehow simultaneously, what appeared to be the coast of France. C'est incroyable, Fleur murmured, her defensive posture relaxing slightly as she took in their surroundings. This castle continues to surprise me. Harry moved toward one of the armchairs near the fire, suddenly aware of how exhausted he felt. The adrenaline of the lake task, followed by the shock of the claiming, had drained him completely. As he sank into the chair, Fleur immediately positioned herself in the one adjacent, angling her body to maintain sight of the door. You should rest, she told him, her voice gentler than he'd heard it before. The claiming bond takes energy from both participants. Is that why I feel like I've been trampled by a hippogriff? Harry asked with a weak smile. Fleur's expression softened further. Your magic is adjusting to mine, just as mine adjusts to yours. It will stabilize soon. She hesitated. I am sorry this happened without your consent, Harry. In the old stories, the claiming was always portrayed as a great honor and blessing. But in reality, it's more complicated, he finished for her. Like all powerful magic, she agreed. My grandmother used to say that the greatest magics never ask permission, they simply recognize truth and act upon it. Harry considered this. And what truth did this magic recognize? Fleur met his gaze directly. That you are someone who protects others at cost to yourself. That you deserve protection in return. A faint blush colored her cheeks. And perhaps, that there was already something between us that made the bond possible. Before Harry could process that startling statement, a soft pop announced the arrival of a house elf bearing a tray of food and 2 goblets of pumpkin juice. Dobby brings refreshments for Harry Potter and his Veela miss, the elf exclaimed, his tennis ball eyes wide with excitement. Headmaster Dumbledore says Harry Potter needs strength after his heroic rescue. Thanks, Dobby, Harry said gratefully, realizing he was famished. The house elf placed the tray on a small table between their chairs and bowed deeply. Dobby is honored to serve Harry Potter in his time of magical bonding. If Harry Potter needs anything else, anything at all, Dobby will bring it immediately. With another pop, he vanished. Fleur eyed the food with approval. At least Hogwarts elves understand proper nourishment after magical exertion. She selected a chicken sandwich from the tray and handed it to Harry before taking one for herself. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the tension in the room gradually dissipating as the fire crackled merrily in the grate. Harry found himself studying Fleur when she wasn't looking directly at him. Her earlier avian features had receded, but something about her still seemed more intense. More present. "Your friends will have questions," Fleur said eventually, breaking the silence. "Especially the girl, Hermione. She seems the scholarly type." Harry nodded. "Hermione probably headed straight for the library the moment Dumbledore dismissed us. By dinner, she'll know more about Veela claimings than either of us." That drew a genuine laugh from Fleur, a melodic sound that seemed to brighten the room. "I like her determination. It reminds me of my mother when she is researching a complex charm." "What's your mother like?" Harry asked, realizing he knew almost nothing about Fleur's family beyond Gabrielle's existence. The question opened a floodgate. As they finished their meal, Fleur told him about her family, her mother Apollon, a half-Veela who worked as an enchantress for the French ministry, her father Sebastian, a diplomat who specialized in international magical cooperation, and her grandmother Celestine, a full Veela who lived in a colony near the Mediterranean coast. "Grandmere will be most interested in meeting you," Fleur said, her expression a mix of amusement and concern. "She has strong opinions about Veela traditions." "Will she be angry about the claiming?" Harry asked hesitantly. Fleur considered this. Not angry. Surprised, perhaps, that it happened to one so young. "I am barely 18, and you are younger still. But the magic does not concern itself with human considerations of age. It recognizes only the soul's capacity for protection and courage." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Fleur immediately tensed, rising to her feet in one fluid motion. "Who is it?" she called, her voice carrying that subtle resonance again. "Ron and Hermione," came the reply. "We've brought Harry's things." Fleur glanced at Harry, who nodded encouragingly. "You can let them in. They're no threat." With visible reluctance, Fleur approached the door and opened it, positioning herself in the gap. "You may enter, but slowly," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ron and Hermione appeared in the doorway, Ron carrying Harry's schoolbag and invisibility cloak, while Hermione struggled with an enormous stack of books that threatened to topple at any moment. "Light reading?" Harry quipped as Hermione dumped the books onto a nearby table. "Research," she corrected, straightening her robes. "There's surprisingly little about Veela claimings in the main library, but Professor McGonagall gave me permission to access the restricted section." She cast a cautious glance at Fleur. "May I sit? I'd like to share what I've learned, if that's all right." Fleur motioned toward the sofa across from Harry's chair. "You may, but please maintain some distance. The claiming is still raw." "Bloody hell, this room is brilliant," Ron exclaimed, gawking at the enchanted window. "Is that really France you can see through there?" "Part of it is," Harry confirmed. "The room seems to know exactly what we need." "Including a small library," Hermione noted, gesturing toward a bookshelf that Harry hadn't noticed before. It contained volumes in both English and French, many with titles related to magical bonds and Veela heritage. As Ron and Hermione settled onto the sofa, Ron with significantly less grace, Fleur resumed her seat beside Harry, though she remained perched on its edge, ready to move if necessary. "So," Hermione began, pulling a small notebook from her pocket, "I've compiled some information about Veela claimings. Most sources agree they're extremely rare, occurring perhaps once or twice a century." She glanced at her notes. The last documented case was in 1921, when a Veela named Lysandra claimed a wizard who saved her from a Norwegian ridgeback in Romania. "That long ago?" Harry asked, surprised. "Well, documented is the key word," Hermione clarified. One text suggested that Veela communities keep their own records and don't always share such personal matters with wizarding authorities. Fleur nodded. This is true. My grandmother's colony maintains ancient scrolls recording all claimings among their people. They consider it private family magic, not for outsider knowledge. What happened in the 1921 case? Harry asked, both curious and apprehensive. Hermione consulted her notes again. According to the record, the wizard, Thaddeus Browning, and the Veela eventually married. They lived primarily in the Veela colony, though Browning maintained his position as a dragonologist. The account mentions that after the initial claiming period passed, they developed a harmonious balance of mutual protection. That sounds not terrible, Harry said cautiously. There are benefits to the bond, Fleur explained. Once stabilized, it enhances magical compatibility between the claimed and the Veela. Combined spell work becomes more powerful. Emotional states are sensed more easily. And, she added with a slight flush, life expectancy often increases for the human partner. Ron whistled. So Harry might live longer because of this? It's theoretically possible, Hermione answered before Fleur could. Veela lifespans naturally exceed wizarding ones by several decades. The bond seems to extend some of that vitality to their partners. But what about the tournament? Harry pressed, returning to his earlier concern. If this bond affects our ability to compete against each other. Hermione's expression grew serious. That's more complicated. I couldn't find any precedent for claimed competitors in a magical tournament. The closest parallel was a case from the 1700s when a wizard under Veela protection participated in a dueling championship against his Veela's brother. The magic apparently prevented either from casting truly harmful spells against their opponent. Which could be problematic in the third task, Fleur acknowledged. I would find it difficult to use magic against you now, Harry. And the bond might interfere if you attempted to outperform me significantly. That's not fair, Ron protested. Harry didn't ask for this. Neither did I, Fleur reminded him, a hint of irritation in her voice. The claiming is not a choice. It is ancient magic responding to specific circumstances. Maybe you both could withdraw from the tournament, Hermione suggested tentatively. Harry and Fleur responded simultaneously, not an option. Impossible. They glanced at each other in surprise, and Harry felt an unexpected connection in their shared determination. I didn't put my name in that goblet, Harry continued, but I'm not backing out now. Not after everything that's happened. And my school's honor depends on my participation, Fleur added. Besides, withdrawing would raise even more questions and scrutiny. Hermione sighed. Then we need to find a way for you both to compete fairly despite the bond. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully against her notebook. Perhaps if you trained together, grew accustomed to magical competition between yourselves in a controlled environment. That might work, Fleur said slowly. The bond would adapt to recognize certain types of magical opposition as non-threatening. Like how parents can duel their children in training without their protective instincts going haywire, Ron suggested, surprising everyone with his insight. Exactly, Fleur agreed, looking at Ron with new appreciation. The bond would learn the difference between tournament competition and genuine danger. As they discussed potential training methods, another knock came at the door. This time, Harry recognized Professor McGonagall's crisp rap. Mr. Potter, Miss Delacour, she called through the door. I've brought the evening editions of both the Daily Prophet and Le Cri de la Gorgone. I'm afraid news of today's events has traveled rather quickly. Fleur tensed again but moved to open the door. McGonagall stood alone in the corridor, holding two newspapers. She made no attempt to enter, simply handing the papers to Fleur. The headmaster suggested you should be aware of how the situation is being reported, she explained, her expression grim. We are, of course, implementing measures to protect your privacy, but Rita Skeeter has been resourceful. Thank you, Professor, Harry said, dreading what sensationalized version of events Skeeter had concocted this time. After McGonagall departed, Fleur unfolded the Daily Prophet on the table between them. The headline made Harry groan: Boy WHO lived ensnared by Veela magic. Triwizard champion claims Potter in shocking display. The accompanying photograph showed the moment of claiming, with golden light surrounding Harry and Fleur at the lake's edge. Beneath it, Skeeter's byline promised exclusive details about the dangerous foreign magic now controlling the boy who lived. The French newspaper was marginally better, though its headline still made Fleur wince: Delacour heiress activates ancestral magic, Triwizard Tournament in chaos. This is going to be a nightmare, Harry muttered, scanning the Prophet's article, which managed to simultaneously suggest he was a victim of dark creature magic and imply he had somehow orchestrated the whole thing for attention. My parents will be furious, Fleur said quietly, reading the French account. Not about the claiming itself, but about how it's being portrayed. Veela magic is sacred to them, not some spectacle for newspapers. Hermione leaned forward to read over Harry's shoulder. This is outrageous. Listen to this. Sources close to the Beauxbatons delegation suggest Miss Delacour may have planned the claiming as a strategy to neutralize her strongest competitor in the tournament. That's complete rubbish. And this part, Ron added, pointing to another paragraph. Ministry experts on dangerous magical creatures have expressed concern about the influence of Veela magic on the impressionable young Potter, with one unnamed official suggesting decontamination procedures may be necessary. He looked up, disgusted. Decontamination. They're talking like Fleur infected you with something. Fleur's hands trembled slightly as she set down her newspaper. This is why many Veela choose to live in secluded colonies. The wizarding world has always feared what it does not understand. We'll set the record straight, Harry promised, surprising himself with his vehemence. Once we understand more about the bond ourselves. And how do you propose to do that? Fleur asked, a hint of challenge in her tone. Rita Skeeter is not known for printing retractions. We have until the third task to figure it out, Hermione said firmly. In the meantime, focusing on managing the bond should be your priority. As if to emphasize her point, the fireplace flames suddenly flared green, and a letter shot out onto the hearth. Fleur snatched it up before Harry could move. It bears my family's seal, she said, examining the elegant wax impression. Breaking it open, she scanned the contents quickly, her expression shifting from concern to relief. My parents will arrive early tomorrow morning, she announced. And they're bringing Grandmere Celestine with them. She looked up at Harry, a mixture of emotions playing across her face. They say they are not angry, merely concerned. And, curious to meet you. Meet me? Harry echoed weakly. As in, judge whether I'm worthy of their daughter's magical claiming? Fleur's lips quirked in a small smile. Something like that. Do not worry, they will see what the Veela magic already recognized. She paused. Though Grandmere can be formidable. Brilliant, Harry muttered. Just what I needed, a formidable Veela grandmother evaluating me after I've been magically claimed without even a proper introduction to the family. Ron snorted with poorly suppressed laughter. Only you, Harry. Most blokes meet the parents after months of dating. You get the whole family, including the powerful magical creature grandmother, after one underwater rescue. It's not funny, Ron, Hermione scolded, though her lips twitched suspiciously. It's a little funny, Harry admitted, finding himself smiling despite the absurdity of the situation. Even Fleur allowed herself a small laugh. My family will help us navigate this, she assured him, her expression growing more serious. They understand the old magics better than any book or professor. As Ron and Hermione prepared to leave for dinner in the Great Hall, promising to return the next day, Harry felt an unexpected sense of calm settling over him. The claiming had been sudden and unwanted, but there was something strangely comforting about Fleur's protective presence, a sensation of being truly watched over that he'd rarely experienced in his life. Try to get some sleep, Hermione advised as she gathered her research notes. Both of you look exhausted. After his friends departed, Harry and Fleur sat in companionable silence, watching the enchanted window as it displayed a sunset that somehow combined both Scottish and French horizons into one breathtaking vista. "We should rest," Fleur eventually said, rising gracefully from her chair. "Tomorrow will bring many conversations." Harry nodded, suddenly aware of the bone-deep fatigue weighing him down. "Good night, Fleur. And, thank you for explaining things. This isn't how I imagined today would end, but at least I understand a bit better now." Fleur's expression softened. "Bonne nuit, Harry. Sleep well. I will be near if you need anything." She moved toward one of the bedroom doors, then paused. "And Harry? I am truly sorry for the complications this brings to your life. But I am not sorry that the magic chose you. There are worse fates than having a Veela's protection." As Harry settled into the remarkably comfortable bed in his temporary room, he reflected on Fleur's words. There were indeed worse fates, he'd experienced several of them already in his short life. And while he hadn't asked for this magical bond, there was something strangely fitting about it. After years of facing dangers alone, he now had someone magically compelled to protect him. The irony wasn't lost on him. All he'd done was what came naturally, saving someone who needed help. Now, through ancient magic he didn't understand, that simple act had created a bond that might change his life forever. As sleep claimed him, his last coherent thought was that tomorrow would bring Fleur's family, including her formidable, full Veela grandmother, to evaluate the boy who had accidentally claimed their daughter's magical protection. Somehow, facing a Hungarian horntail suddenly seemed like the simpler challenge. Chapter 2, Bonds and Barriers. Harry awoke to the sound of hushed voices, rapid French punctuated by the occasional English phrase. He blinked at the unfamiliar canopy above his bed, momentarily disoriented until yesterday's extraordinary events came rushing back. The lake. Gabrielle. Fleur's kiss. The golden light that had enveloped them both. The Veela claiming. Groaning softly, Harry reached for his glasses on the bedside table. According to his watch, it was just past 7 in the morning. Earlier than he'd normally wake on a weekend, but the murmured conversation beyond his door suggested Fleur's family had already arrived. He dressed quickly, mentally rehearsing what he might say to people who discovered their daughter had formed a magical bond with a 14-year-old English boy she barely knew. Nothing in his life with the Dursleys had prepared him for meeting magical in-laws, not that this was exactly the same thing, he reminded himself hastily. Taking a deep breath, Harry opened his door and stepped into the sitting room. 4 people turned to look at him simultaneously. Fleur, wearing robes of periwinkle blue, stood nearest to his door. Beside her was a tall, elegant woman who could only be her mother, the same silvery blonde hair, the same refined features, though with lines of experience at the corners of her eyes. Next to her stood a distinguished-looking man with dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, his posture erect and dignified. But it was the 4th person who captured Harry's attention completely. She appeared both ancient and ageless, her silver hair cascading in waves to her waist, her face remarkably unlined despite eyes that held centuries of wisdom. Though she sat perfectly still in a conjured armchair, there was a wild energy about her, like lightning temporarily contained in human form. When she looked at Harry, he felt a curious sensation, as though she could see not just his appearance but layers beneath, right down to his magical core. "So," she said in perfect, though accented English, "this is the young man who saved my Gabrielle and awakened Fleur's heritage." Harry swallowed. "Good morning," he managed, sounding far more composed than he felt. "I'm Harry Potter." "Indeed you are," the elderly Veela said with a slight smile. "I am Celestine Delacour, Fleur's grandmother. This is my daughter Apollon and her husband Sebastian." "It's nice to meet you all," Harry said, feeling woefully inadequate. "I'm sorry about the circumstances." Sebastian Delacour stepped forward, extending his hand. "There is nothing to apologize for, Mr. Potter. Magic follows its own wisdom, often wiser than our human plans." Harry shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. Mr. Delacour seemed neither angry nor accusatory, merely evaluative. "Please, sit," Apollon suggested, gesturing to the chair beside her mother's. "We have much to discuss, and I'm sure you have many questions." As Harry took the offered seat, Fleur moved to stand slightly behind him, her proximity both strange and oddly comforting. He noted that while she still maintained her protective position, her demeanor seemed less tense than the previous day. "Fleur tells us you handled the initial claiming remarkably well," Apollon continued, her accent similar to her daughter's but slightly less pronounced. "Many would have panicked or resisted, which can make the bond turbulent." "I'm still trying to understand it all," Harry admitted. "Everything happened so quickly." Celestine leaned forward, her piercing blue eyes, several shades deeper than Fleur's, studying him intently. "Tell me, young man, what did you feel when the claiming occurred? Not what you thought, but what you felt." Harry considered the question carefully, aware that his answer seemed important to the elderly Veela. "It was warm," he said finally. "Like sunlight spreading through me. And there was a sense of connection. Like finding something I didn't know was missing." A satisfied expression crossed Celestine's face. "The bond recognized compatible magic," she declared, glancing at her granddaughter. "This is good. It will make the transition easier." "Transition?" Harry asked, trying not to sound alarmed. "From the initial claiming state to a balanced bond," Sebastian explained. "The protective intensity Fleur is experiencing now will gradually moderate, allowing both of you greater independence while maintaining the connection." "How long will that take?" "It varies," Apollon said. "A week, perhaps 2. Fleur's heritage is strong, Veela can manifest claiming bonds, but it's rare. For her to activate one at her age speaks to both her magical potency and the significance of your protective act." "I just did what anyone would do," Harry protested. "I couldn't leave Gabrielle down there." "But that is precisely it," Celestine interjected, her voice carrying that same resonant quality he'd heard in Fleur's during the claiming. "You believe anyone would have done the same. They would not. Self-preservation is the instinct most follow. You chose differently, at risk to yourself, for someone you had never met. The ancient magic recognizes such actions." "Where is Gabrielle?" Harry asked, noticing the younger girl's absence. "With Madame Maxime," Sebastian answered. "She was quite disappointed not to come, but we thought it best to limit the initial family meeting." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Fleur moved with liquid grace to answer it, opening the door just enough to reveal Dumbledore standing in the corridor. "Good morning," the headmaster greeted cheerfully. "I trust the accommodations have been satisfactory." "Quite adequate, Dumbledore," Celestine replied, rising from her chair with surprising agility. "Though I find your castle drafty, as always." Harry blinked at the familiar way she addressed the headmaster, suggesting they'd met before. "Ah, Celestine. Still finding fault with Scottish architecture after all these decades." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled as he entered the room. "The last time you visited was, I believe, during the International Confederation Conference of 1957. When you still had auburn in your beard," she confirmed with a slight smile. "You've grown more eccentric with age, I see. As have you, my dear. As have you." The headmaster turned to Harry. "I've come to discuss arrangements for the coming week. The tournament officials have been in rather heated debate about how to proceed." "Have they reached a decision?" Sebastian asked, his diplomatic training evident in his measured tone. "Not officially," Dumbledore replied, conjuring a chair for himself with a casual flick of his wand. "However, they are leaning toward allowing both champions to continue competing, with certain accommodations." "What kind of accommodations?" Harry and Fleur asked simultaneously. "The details are still being determined," Dumbledore said, "but essentially, they propose modifying the third task to acknowledge your bond. You would still compete individually, but the magical obstacles would be adjusted to prevent situations where the claiming might interfere with fair competition." That sounds reasonable, Apollon said cautiously. Though much depends on the specific adjustments. Indeed, Dumbledore agreed. Barty Crouch and Ludo Bagman will want to meet with you both once the modifications are finalized. He paused, stroking his long beard thoughtfully. There is also the matter of your day-to-day arrangements until the claiming settles. I understand from Madame Maxime that Mr. and Mrs. Delacour must return to France tomorrow, though Madame Celestine has offered to remain at Hogwarts temporarily. The elderly Veela nodded regally. My granddaughter will need guidance through this transition. I have arranged leave from the colony for 2 weeks. Excellent, Dumbledore beamed. We've prepared quarters for you near the Beauxbatons carriage. As for Harry and Fleur, we must find a balance between accommodating the bond and maintaining educational normalcy. I can attend classes, Fleur said, speaking up for the first time since Harry had entered the room. The initial urgency has diminished somewhat. She glanced at her grandmother. Grandmere helped me establish better control last night. Very good, Dumbledore said. And Harry, how do you feel about returning to your regular schedule? Harry considered the question. I'd like to try, he said honestly. Though I'm not sure how others will react. Your classmates have been thoroughly briefed by their heads of house, Dumbledore assured him. While I cannot promise complete understanding, they have been instructed to respect appropriate boundaries and avoid inflammatory language regarding Veela heritage. And Rita Skeeter? Harry asked grimly. I doubt she got that memo. A rare flash of irritation crossed Dumbledore's features. Miss Skeeter has been explicitly banned from Hogwarts grounds for the remainder of the tournament. Her reporting yesterday crossed several ethical and legal lines regarding the privacy of underage magical beings. That won't stop her, Harry muttered. Perhaps not entirely, Sebastian acknowledged, but we have also taken legal steps. The French Magical Embassy has filed formal complaints with the British Ministry's Department of Magical Journalism Oversight. Harry hadn't even known such a department existed, but he appreciated the effort nonetheless. When can we start attending classes again? He asked, surprising himself with his eagerness to return to normal routines. Tomorrow, if you feel ready, Dumbledore suggested. Today might be better spent acquainting yourselves with how the bond functions in various settings. He turned to Celestine. Would you be willing to supervise a series of calibration exercises? Of course, she agreed. It will help stabilize the bond more quickly if they understand its parameters. After finalizing arrangements for meals and announcing that Ron and Hermione had been given permission to visit later that afternoon, Dumbledore departed. The moment the door closed behind him, Celestine turned to Harry with renewed intensity. Now, she said, we begin your education in Veela bonds. First lesson, physical proximity requirements. The next several hours were both enlightening and occasionally embarrassing as Celestine put Harry and Fleur through various tests to determine the bond's current limitations. They discovered that Fleur could comfortably maintain a distance of about 30 feet before feeling magical distress, a significant improvement from the previous day. Physical contact with others was still problematic. When Sebastian deliberately placed a hand on Harry's shoulder, Fleur had hissed softly before catching herself. The territorial response is normal during early claiming, Celestine explained after Fleur had calmed. It will diminish, especially with people you trust around Harry. By lunchtime, Harry's head was swimming with information about Veela magic, claiming bonds, and the complex history of human-Veela relations throughout European magical societies. Apollon and Sebastian shared stories of their own courtship, how Sebastian had needed Celestine's approval before being permitted to marry her half-Veela daughter, and how certain magical traditions had been incorporated into their bonding ceremony. Not that you and Fleur are anywhere near that stage, Apollon added hastily, seeing Harry's expression. A claiming bond can exist independently of any formal relationship. In ancient times, warriors claimed by Veela often served as guardians or champions without romantic attachments. That's good to know, Harry said, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. Fleur, who had gradually relaxed enough to sit beside him rather than standing guard, gave him a sidelong glance. Disappointed, Harry, she teased, a hint of her usual confidence returning. Before Harry could stammer a response, the door opened to admit Dobby carrying an elaborate lunch tray. Dobby has prepared special French-inspired dishes for the honored Delacour family, the house elf announced proudly. With English options for Harry Potter, of course. The spread was impressive, delicate pastries filled with herbs and cheese, a steaming bouillabaisse, crusty bread, and for Harry, a familiar shepherd's pie alongside everything else. How thoughtful, Apollon said, clearly charmed by the elf's enthusiasm. Thank you, Dobby. The house elf bowed deeply, his ears flapping. French mistress knows Dobby's name. Such an honor. He turned to Harry with wide eyes. Harry Potter's new family is as kind as he is. After Dobby departed, Celestine sampled the bouillabaisse with an appreciative nod. Your house elves cook better than I remembered, though their accent in the cuisine remains distinctly Scottish. Everything tastes of butter here, Fleur agreed, though she ate with good appetite nonetheless. As they dined, Sebastian steered the conversation toward Harry's background. With remarkable diplomacy, he extracted information about the Dursleys, Harry's experiences at Hogwarts, and his unexpected entry into the Triwizard Tournament. So no one believes you didn't enter yourself? He asked, his expression thoughtful. Most don't, Harry admitted. Except my closest friends. And yet someone clearly did enter your name, Sebastian mused. Someone who perhaps wished to see you in dangerous situations. That's what I've been thinking, Harry agreed, surprised by Mr. Delacour's quick understanding. But Dumbledore says I have to compete regardless. The magical contract is indeed binding, Apollon confirmed. Though with the claiming bond, the situation has become more complex. Whoever placed your name in the goblet could not have anticipated this development. Which may work to your advantage, Celestine observed. The claiming offers certain protections that might frustrate their plans. After lunch, Apollon produced a delicate silver instrument that resembled a miniature scale with crystal pendulums hanging from either end. This will help us measure the strength and nature of your bond, she explained, placing it on the table between Harry and Fleur. It's a family heirloom used for generations to evaluate Veela connections. The device activated at her touch, the crystal pendulums beginning to glow and oscillate gently. Place your wand hands above each pendulum, she instructed. Don't touch them, just hover about an inch above. Harry and Fleur followed her directions. Immediately, the crystals pulsed brighter, their movements synchronizing into a graceful rhythm. Threads of golden light emerged from each crystal, weaving together in the space between to form an intricate pattern that reminded Harry of a Celtic knot. Fascinating, Apollon murmured, studying the formation. A protection-dominant bond, as expected, but with significant resonance patterns in other areas. What does that mean? Harry asked, mesmerized by the dancing light. It means, Celestine answered, that while the claiming began as a protective response, your magical cores are harmonizing in multiple dimensions. She pointed to specific junctures in the golden pattern. Here, empathic resonance. Here, shared resilience. And here, she indicated a particularly bright node, potential for amplified combined magic. Is that unusual? Fleur asked, looking somewhat surprised herself. For an initial claiming, yes, her grandmother confirmed. Typically, these secondary resonances develop over months or years, not days. She fixed Harry with her penetrating gaze again. Your magic is exceptionally compatible with Veela energies, Mr. Potter. Most interesting. Before Harry could ask what that might mean, another knock came at the door. This time, it was Ron and Hermione, laden with books and wearing expressions of nervous curiosity. Fleur, though still protective, welcomed them much more readily than the previous day. Enter, she said, with only the slightest hint of territorial edge. My family will not stay much longer. Introductions were made, with Hermione visibly struggling to contain her questions in the presence of a full Veela. When Apollon mentioned the measuring device, still displaying the golden pattern, Hermione's scholarly restraint finally broke. Is that a vinculum speculum, she asked breathlessly. I read about them in Magical Bonds Through the Ages, but the book said they're incredibly rare. Apollon smiled indulgently. Indeed it is. This one has been in my family for 12 generations. You have an impressive knowledge base, Miss Granger. Hermione's been researching Veela bonds since yesterday, Ron explained. Barely slept, from the look of her. Knowledge is the best defense against ignorance, Celestine said approvingly. And there has been much ignorance about Veela throughout wizarding history. With that opening, Hermione launched into a series of respectful but detailed questions about Veela heritage, claiming bonds, and historical precedents. Rather than being annoyed, the Delacours, particularly Celestine, seemed pleased by her genuine intellectual curiosity. As the afternoon progressed, Sebastian and Apollon prepared to depart, needing to return to the Beauxbatons carriage to check on Gabrielle before their scheduled meeting with tournament officials. We will return before dinner, Apollon promised, embracing her daughter. Remember what we practiced this morning. Control comes from acknowledging the instinct, then choosing your response. After Fleur's parents left, Celestine engaged Ron in a surprisingly animated conversation about wizard chess, having spotted the travel set he'd brought in his bag. I have played this game for over a century, she informed him with a competitive gleam in her eye. Few humans present a challenge anymore. Ron, momentarily intimidated, quickly rallied. I've been told I'm not bad, he said modestly, though Harry knew he was underplaying his skill. Excellent. Set up the board while I speak with my granddaughter privately, Celestine instructed, rising with that same uncanny grace. Miss Granger, perhaps you could share your research findings with Harry. I sense you've discovered something significant that you're eager to discuss. With that perceptive observation, she guided Fleur into her bedroom, closing the door softly behind them. Hermione immediately moved to sit beside Harry, pulling a journal from her bag. How are you holding up? She asked first, her concern evident. Better than yesterday, Harry admitted. Celestine has been helping Fleur control the claiming instincts, and we've been learning how the bond works. Fleur's grandmother is intimidating, Ron muttered as he arranged chess pieces on the travel board. In a brilliant sort of way. She seems to like you, Harry pointed out. Probably because I'm not staring at her like she's a textbook come to life, Ron replied with a pointed glance at Hermione, who flushed. I'm just fascinated by Veela culture. It's barely covered in our curriculum, and most of the books in the library perpetuate wizarding prejudices rather than presenting accurate information. What's this significant discovery Celestine thinks you've made? Harry asked, nodding toward her journal. Hermione lowered her voice, though the closed door likely provided sufficient privacy. I found something in a very old text about magical bindings. It suggested that Veela claiming bonds were once used deliberately as protection against certain dark magics, including possession and mind control. Harry's interest sharpened. You think that might be relevant to my situation? I think it might be relevant to why someone entered you in the tournament, Hermione replied. If someone is trying to harm you or control you somehow, the claiming bond might have accidentally interfered with their plans. Celestine said something similar, Harry murmured thoughtfully. That the claiming might offer protections that could frustrate whoever put my name in the goblet. Exactly. Hermione's eyes gleamed with intellectual excitement. The book was frustratingly vague about specifics, but it mentioned that the dominion of foreign will cannot penetrate a claiming bond. I think that might refer to curses like the Imperius, or perhaps other forms of magical control. So whoever's been orchestrating this whole tournament mess might find their grand finale doesn't work as planned? Ron suggested, looking up from his chess preparations. Potentially, Hermione agreed. But that's assuming they don't adapt their plans now that the claiming is public knowledge. The bedroom door opened, and Fleur emerged looking calmer and more centered than Harry had seen her since before the second task. Celestine followed, her ageless face serene. We have made good progress, the elderly Veela announced. Fleur now understands how to channel the protective energies more productively. She turned to Ron. Now, young man, let us see if your chess skills match your confidence. As Celestine and Ron became absorbed in their game, which quickly proved more competitive than Harry had anticipated, Fleur joined him and Hermione on the sofa. Grandmere has taught me meditation techniques used by full Veela to manage their transformative magic, she explained quietly. It helps contain the more primal aspects of the claiming. You seem more at ease, Harry observed. I am, she agreed with a small smile. The constant urge to position myself between you and every potential threat has subsided somewhat. Though I suspect it would return instantly in any genuine danger. Hermione's been researching protective aspects of Veela bonds, Harry told her, gesturing to the journal. She thinks the claiming might shield me from certain types of dark magic. Fleur's expression grew thoughtful. This aligns with our family histories. During the rise of Grindelwald, several Veela claimed key resistance members to protect them from compulsion curses. So it's been used offensively before? Hermione asked eagerly. Not exactly used, Fleur clarified. The claiming cannot be deliberately activated for strategic purposes. It must arise naturally from genuine protective action. But historically, claimed wizards and witches have been noted to resist certain types of magical control. Like the Imperius Curse? Harry asked, remembering his unexpected resistance to Moody's demonstration in defense class. Among others, Fleur confirmed. Though I'm surprised you know of such things at your age. Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. Professor Moody demonstrated the unforgivables in class. He even cast the Imperius on students to teach us resistance. Fleur looked shocked. That is highly irregular teaching methodology. At Beaux Batons, such curses are theoretical study only until the final year. Moody's methods are unorthodox, Hermione acknowledged diplomatically. Barking mad, more like, Ron added from across the room, just before Celestine captured his knight with a triumphant flourish. Their conversation was interrupted by another knock, this one hesitant and unfamiliar. Fleur tensed slightly but moved to answer it with significantly more control than she'd shown the previous day. Neville Longbottom stood in the corridor, looking nervous but determined. Hello, he said, clutching a thick book to his chest. Professor Sprout asked me to bring this. She said it might help with your situation. Fleur assessed him briefly before stepping back to allow entry. You are Harry's friend? She asked, her tone neutral but not unwelcoming. Yes, Neville confirmed, glancing uncertainly at the chess-playing Veela grandmother before focusing on Harry. How are you doing, Harry? Managing, Harry replied with a reassuring smile. Thanks for the gillyweed, by the way. Worked perfectly. Neville relaxed slightly. Glad I could help. He held out the book. This is a copy of Mediterranean Magical Flora, Emotional Properties and Applications. Professor Sprout thought some of the plants might help with, magical bond stabilization. Hermione immediately perked up. May I? She asked, reaching for the volume. As they examined the book, discovering several plants with properties that might indeed help moderate the claiming bond's intensity, Harry noticed something remarkable. Fleur, while still aware of everyone's positions in the room, had stopped hovering directly beside him. Instead, she conversed easily with Neville about herbology, apparently a shared interest, while maintaining a comfortable distance of several feet. Progress, Harry thought. Small but significant. The afternoon mellowed into early evening. Neville departed after a productive herbology discussion, promising to check Professor Sprout's greenhouses for some of the beneficial plants. Ron and Celestine remained locked in their chess battle, which had grown increasingly complex, with the elderly Veela showing grudging respect for her young opponent's tactical mind. Your friend has unusual strategic insights, she remarked to Harry during a particularly tense moment in the game. He sees patterns others miss. Ron's ears reddened at the praise. My dad taught me when I was 5, he said with uncharacteristic modesty. It's just practice, really. No, Celestine countered, studying the board. Many play for decades without developing such instincts. You have the mind of a strategist, Mr. Weasley. Eventually, Sebastian and Apollon returned with Gabrielle in tow. The young girl immediately ran to Harry, hugging him impulsively. "Thank you for saving me," she exclaimed in heavily accented English. "Maman says you are my hero." Harry patted her back awkwardly, touched by her unfiltered gratitude. "You're welcome, though I'm sure anyone would have done the same." "Non," she said with childlike certainty, echoing her grandmother's earlier sentiment. "Not anyone. You." Fleur watched the interaction with a soft expression that transformed her usually haughty features into something much warmer. For a moment, Harry caught a glimpse of a different Fleur than the one who had dismissed him as a little boy earlier in the tournament, a Fleur capable of genuine tenderness. Sebastian cleared his throat. "We've just come from meeting with the tournament officials," he announced. "They've reached a decision regarding the third task." All attention immediately shifted to him. Even Ron and Celestine paused their chess match. "Both Harry and Fleur will be permitted to compete," he continued. "However, the task will be modified to accommodate the claiming bond. Rather than entering the maze separately based on previous scores, you will enter simultaneously through different access points." "That seems reasonable," Harry said cautiously. "What else?" "The obstacles within the maze will be designed to test skill rather than foster direct competition between champions," Apollon explained. "And there will be additional monitoring to ensure the bond doesn't create unfair advantages or disadvantages." "What about Cedric and Victor?" Fleur asked, concern evident in her voice. "This changes the structure of the competition for them as well." "They have been consulted and have agreed to the modifications," Sebastian assured her. Mr. Diggory, in particular, expressed support for solutions that would allow everyone to compete fairly. That sounded like Cedric, Harry thought. Always concerned with fairness. "The tournament committee also requested that you both participate in a magical assessment tomorrow afternoon," Apollon added. "To better understand how the claiming affects your spellcasting, particularly in competitive scenarios." "What kind of assessment?" Harry asked warily. "Controlled magical exercises," she clarified. "Nothing dangerous, just measurements of spell strength, accuracy, and magical interactions when you cast independently versus collaboratively." Dinner arrived shortly thereafter, delivered by a beaming Dobby who had outdone himself with a fusion of French and British cuisine. As they dined, the conversation turned to preparations for returning to classes the next day. "I've spoken with Professor McGonagall," Hermione said. "Since most of Harry's classes are different from Fleur's, they've arranged for temporary schedule adjustments to ensure you're never too far apart." "The castle's magic should help as well," Celestine observed. "Hogwarts has accommodated magical bonds before. The very stones will adjust to maintain compatible proximity if you both acknowledge the need." After dinner, as the evening drew to a close, final arrangements were made for the coming days. Apollon and Sebastian would return to France the next morning with Gabrielle, while Celestine would remain at Hogwarts for at least a week to guide Fleur through the bond's stabilization. "You'll both sleep here tonight," Celestine decided. "Tomorrow, we'll assess whether returning to your regular dormitories is feasible." She fixed Harry with a knowing look. "I suspect the bond will allow greater separation sooner than is typical. Your magical signatures are harmonizing remarkably well." When Ron and Hermione departed for Gryffindor Tower, Fleur walked them to the door, a small but significant detail that Harry didn't miss. Yesterday, she wouldn't have been willing to put even that much distance between herself and Harry. Later, as Harry prepared for bed, a soft knock came at his bedroom door. He opened it to find Fleur standing there, her silver blonde hair loose around her shoulders, wearing elegant silk pajamas that made Harry suddenly conscious of his own worn flannel set. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Harry asked, genuinely confused. "For your patience. For not resenting this bond that was thrust upon you without consent." She hesitated. Many wizards would be angry at such a dramatic change to their lives, especially one initiated by a part human. Harry winced at her clinical self-description. "You're not, I am part Veela," she interrupted gently. "I don't say this with shame, but as fact. The wizarding world often treats those of mixed heritage as lesser. You have shown none of that prejudice, despite the complications I've caused you." "You didn't choose this either," Harry reminded her. "And anyway, I'm used to magical complications. My life hasn't exactly been normal so far." A small smile curved her lips. "No, I suppose not." She paused, seeming to debate something internally before continuing. "There is something else you should know. As the bond stabilizes, you may begin to sense my emotions. Just as I am becoming attuned to yours." "Is that happening already?" Harry asked, suddenly concerned about which of his feelings she might have detected. "Somewhat," she admitted. "I feel echoes. General impressions rather than specific thoughts." "That's a bit unsettling," he confessed. "It will become natural with time," she assured him. "And the connection works both ways. If you find yourself suddenly anxious or alert without cause, it may be my emotions you're sensing." Harry nodded, processing this new dimension of their bond. "I'll keep that in mind." "Bonne nuit, Harry," she said, turning to leave. "Tomorrow will be challenging as we face the school together, but we will manage. Good night, Fleur." As he settled into bed, Harry reflected on how quickly his life had transformed. Just 2 days ago, Fleur Delacour had been a distant, somewhat haughty competitor who barely acknowledged his existence. Now they were bound by ancient magic, sharing living space, and potentially about to start sensing each other's emotions. Even by his standards, this was a remarkable turn of events. The great hall fell silent when Harry and Fleur entered for breakfast the next morning. Celestine walked several paces behind them, her ageless presence drawing nearly as many stares as the claimed pair themselves. Though Fleur no longer hovered protectively at Harry's side, she walked close enough that their hands occasionally brushed, and her eyes continuously scanned the room for potential threats. "Well," Harry muttered, "this is going to be fun." "Ignore them," Fleur advised, though her own posture had stiffened in response to the collective attention. "Their curiosity will fade eventually." Dumbledore rose from the staff table, effectively breaking the awkward silence. "Good morning to all," he announced cheerfully. "As you can see, Mr. Potter and Miss Delacour have rejoined us. I trust everyone remembers the guidelines your heads of houses discussed regarding respectful interaction with magical bonds." With that simple acknowledgement, the buzz of normal conversation gradually resumed, though Harry noted many students still watching them surreptitiously. The biggest question had been where they would sit. After consultation with Celestine, they decided to alternate between the Gryffindor and Ravenclaw tables for meals, starting with Gryffindor this morning. As they approached, Ron waved them over to where he and Hermione had saved 3 seats. "Morning," Ron greeted them through a mouthful of toast. "Sleep all right?" "Well enough," Harry replied, sliding onto the bench beside him. Fleur took the seat on Harry's other side, while Celestine settled across from them with remarkable dignity considering the bench seating was clearly not designed for someone of her stature. The nearby Gryffindors maintained a bubble of space around them, clearly unsure how to interact with the situation. Fred and George, however, showed no such hesitation. "Harry, you magnificent bastard," Fred, or possibly George, declared, sliding down the bench toward them. "Only you could turn a rescue mission into accidentally acquiring a magical French girlfriend." "Fred!" Hermione hissed, looking mortified. To Harry's surprise, Fleur laughed, a genuine, musical sound that turned several heads. "Your description lacks certain nuances," she told Fred, "but captures the essence of the situation admirably." The twins grinned identically. "We were just telling Lee here that we should start selling Potter's Claiming Charm in our joke line," George said. "Guaranteed to make foreign beauties magically bond with you or your money back." "You will do no such thing," Celestine said, though her stern words were belied by the amused twinkle in her eyes. "Veela magic is not to be trivialized for commercial gain. Yes, ma'am, the twins replied in unison, looking impressed rather than chastised. As breakfast progressed, the initial awkwardness gradually dissipated. Fleur engaged Hermione in conversation about the differences between Beauxbatons and Hogwarts curricula, while Celestine regaled the increasingly large audience of Gryffindor boys with heavily edited tales of Veela encounters with famous wizards throughout history. Merlin himself once sought the wisdom of the Mediterranean Veela colonies, she informed them with practiced storytelling cadence. He left with the knowledge he sought, and considerably less hair than when he arrived. Just as Harry was beginning to think they might navigate the day without major incident, Draco Malfoy sauntered past the Gryffindor table, Crabbe and Goyle in tow. "So, Potter," he drawled, loudly enough to be heard by surrounding tables, "using a dangerous magical creature to improve your tournament chances? My father says the Ministry's considering classifying you as a creature hybrid now." Before Harry could respond, Fleur rose from her seat with fluid grace. The temperature around them seemed to drop several degrees as she fixed Malfoy with a glacial stare. "What an interesting perspective, mister," she inquired, her voice deceptively soft. "Malfoy," Draco replied, momentarily wrong-footed by her direct attention. "Draco Malfoy." "Ah, Malfoy," Fleur repeated, as though savoring the name. "Your family originated in France, did they not? Before fleeing to England during the Grindelwald conflicts?" Draco's pale face flushed. "My family has a long and distinguished, yes, I'm sure," Fleur interrupted dismissively. "The Delacours have kept records of notable magical lineages for centuries. I believe your ancestors had some unfortunate business dealings with Veela colonies near Lyon." She smiled, showing just a hint of teeth. "How fascinating that those old connections should resurface now." Malfoy's usual swagger faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, though his eyes darted nervously towards Celestine, who was watching the exchange with predatory interest. "Perhaps ask your father," Fleur suggested sweetly. "I'm sure he remembers why Malfoys are no longer welcome in certain regions of magical France." Without another word, Draco retreated, his face a mottled pink. "What was that about?" Harry asked as Fleur resumed her seat. "An old debt," Celestine answered before her granddaughter could. "The Malfoys once attempted to exploit Veela magic for personal gain. The consequences were educational for them." "You were brilliant," Ron told Fleur admiringly. "I've never seen Malfoy back down so quickly." Fleur shrugged elegantly. "Family history is a powerful tool. The boy clearly knows enough to fear Veela memory, even if he doesn't know the specific details." After breakfast, they faced the challenge of attending classes. Harry's first lesson was charms, while Fleur had transfiguration with the 7th years. The classrooms were on different floors, potentially stretching the bond's current proximity limitations. "We've arranged for you to use a specific staircase," Professor McGonagall informed them, appearing beside the Gryffindor table as breakfast concluded. "It will create a direct passage between your classrooms, minimizing the actual magical distance between you." "Hogwarts adjusting its architecture?" Hermione asked, fascinated. "I've read about the castle's adaptive properties, but I've never seen it demonstrated so specifically." "It is an ancient building with ancient magic," Celestine observed. "Like many magical structures of its era, it recognizes and accommodates magical bonds." The special staircase proved to be a narrow, spiral affair hidden behind a tapestry depicting unicorns drinking from a moonlit pool. It connected the charms corridor directly to the Transfiguration classroom, reducing what would normally be a 5-minute walk to mere seconds. "I will attend your first classes today," Celestine told them at the junction where they would separate. "To monitor the bond's response to educational separation. After that, I believe you will manage independently." Harry's charms class was both better and worse than he'd expected. Professor Flitwick handled the situation with professional calm, making no special mention of Harry's condition beyond ensuring he was seated near the door connected to the special staircase. His classmates, however, alternated between studious avoidance and intense curiosity, with Seamus Finnegan eventually voicing the question many seemed to be thinking. So, Harry, he whispered during a practice session of summoning charms, can you feel her in your head? The Veela, I mean. It's not like that, Harry replied, keeping his voice low. It's more like, awareness. I know she's nearby, that's all. This wasn't entirely accurate. Twice during the lesson, he'd felt brief flashes of what he suspected were Fleur's emotions, first frustration, then a burst of satisfaction that coincided with successful spell work. But he wasn't about to share those details and fuel more gossip. Halfway through the class, he felt a sudden spike of alarm that wasn't his own. He tensed, turning toward the staircase door, just as it opened to reveal Fleur. Her eyes immediately found his, and the tension in her posture eased. Pardon the interruption, Professor, she said to Flitwick. I needed to verify something. The tiny charms professor nodded understandingly. Quite all right, Miss Delacour. Magical bonds often require visual confirmation during early formation. After assuring herself Harry was safe, Fleur retreated back up the staircase. Harry noticed several of his male classmates staring after her with glazed expressions. She's still got her allure, Dean Thomas murmured, blinking rapidly. I thought the claiming thing might have turned it off. The allure is inherent to Veela heritage, Hermione explained quietly. The claiming bond is separate, though it may make her allure less effective on Harry specifically. Harry hadn't considered that aspect before, but reflecting on it, he realized Hermione might be right. While he still found Fleur objectively beautiful, the somewhat dazed feeling he'd occasionally experienced in her presence had diminished considerably. By lunchtime, Harry was mentally exhausted from the constant attention and whispers that followed him between classes. When he and Fleur reunited in the Great Hall, he could tell she was similarly drained. Perhaps we should eat elsewhere today, she suggested, noting the heads turning their way as they entered. The room of requirement, perhaps. Good idea, Harry agreed gratefully. Celestine, who had been observing their classes alternately throughout the morning, nodded her approval. The bond is stabilizing well, but unnecessary social stress may slow the process. A quiet lunch would be beneficial. They had just turned to leave when Victor Crumb approached, his expression serious but not unfriendly. Potter, Delacour, he greeted them with a formal nod. May I speak with you? About the tournament. After a brief hesitation, they agreed, following Crumb to a quiet alcove off the entrance hall. I want to understand, Crumb said without preamble, his accent thick but his words carefully chosen. This bond between you, it does not compromise the competition. The officials have modified the third task to accommodate it, Harry explained. We'll still compete individually. Crumb nodded slowly. And you did not plan this? It was accident. Completely unexpected, Fleur assured him. Veela claiming cannot be deliberately activated for strategic advantage. I believe you, Crumb decided after studying them intently. Durmstrang teaches much about magical bonds. This one has authenticity. He straightened his shoulders. I will tell Cedric also. He has concerns but is too polite to ask directly. We appreciate that, Harry said sincerely. The last thing we wanted was to disrupt the tournament. With that matter settled, they made their way to the room of requirement, which obligingly transformed into a peaceful dining space with a view of both the Hogwarts grounds and the distant French coastline. Dobby appeared almost immediately with a lunch spread, his large eyes bright with excitement. Dobby has been hoping Harry Potter would request lunch privately. Dobby has prepared special dishes to help with magical bond stabilization. He gestured proudly to several items on the tray. Traditional Veela colony recipes with ingredients from Hogwarts greenhouses. How did you know Veela recipes? Celestine asked, examining the offerings with professional interest. Dobby asked the oldest house elf in the kitchens, who remembered serving Veela visitors in 1792, the elf explained proudly. Old Mipsy taught Dobby the proper preparation techniques. The food was indeed excellent, subtle flavors that seemed to harmonize with the magical energy flowing between Harry and Fleur. By the time they'd finished eating, Harry felt more centered and calm than he had all morning. The afternoon assessment with the tournament officials is next, Celestine reminded them. It will take place on the Quidditch pitch at 2 o'clock. What exactly will they be testing? Harry asked, still uncertain about the purpose of this evaluation. How your magic interacts now, she explained. Claiming bonds often enhance certain types of complementary spell work while potentially inhibiting directly competitive casting. You think the bond might prevent us from properly competing against each other? Fleur asked, frowning. It might, Celestine acknowledged. Which is why the officials need to understand the bond's magical parameters before finalizing the third task modifications. The assessment proved to be more comprehensive than Harry had anticipated. When they arrived at the Quidditch pitch, they found it transformed into a testing ground with various stations set up to measure different aspects of magical performance. Ludo Bagman bounced around energetically, while Barty Crouch observed with his usual stern efficiency. Madame Maxime and Dumbledore were also present, along with a wizard Harry didn't recognize wearing the official robes of the Department of Magical Cooperation. Welcome, welcome. Bagman greeted them enthusiastically. Fascinating development, absolutely fascinating. Who would have thought the tournament would give us an opportunity to study such rare magic? The purpose is assessment, not study, Crouch corrected stiffly. We must ensure fair competition parameters. The tests began with basic spellcasting measurements, each of them performing standard charms and transfigurations while magical instruments recorded power, precision, and other metrics. Next came proximity tests, with Harry and Fleur gradually increasing the distance between them while continuing to cast spells. Interesting, muttered the Ministry Wizard, examining the readings. Spell efficiency remains stable up to approximately 40 feet, then begins to fluctuate. Much better than typical claiming bonds at this stage of development. The most revealing tests, however, came when they were asked to cast magic against each other. First, they attempted simple disarming spells, Harry's signature Expelliarmus versus Fleur's more elegant disarmament charm. Both found their spells significantly underpowered, as though the magic itself resisted their offensive intent toward one another. As expected, Crouch noted, making annotations on his parchment. Direct competitive casting is inhibited. Now, Dumbledore suggested, perhaps a demonstration of collaborative magic. At his direction, Harry and Fleur stood back-to-back and simultaneously cast shield charms, intending to create a protective bubble around them both. The result was spectacular, a dome of shimmering energy twice as powerful as either could have produced individually, with an iridescent quality that reminded Harry of soap bubbles caught in sunlight. Magnificent, Madame Maxime murmured, while Bagman applauded enthusiastically. The final test involved a simulated maze obstacle, a sphinx conjured by Dumbledore that posed riddles they had to answer separately while standing on opposite sides of a magical barrier. To assess independent problem-solving while magically connected, Crouch explained. Harry struggled with his riddle until he felt a sudden clarity that didn't seem entirely his own. Glancing toward Fleur, he caught her gaze through the translucent barrier. She wasn't overtly helping him, but somehow her confidence in her own solution bolstered his thinking. The bond facilitates knowledge sharing, the Ministry Wizard observed. Not direct thought transmission, but emotional reinforcement that enhances cognitive processes. By the time the assessment concluded, the officials had compiled extensive notes on how the claiming bond affected their magic. Crouch appeared satisfied, while Bagman seemed positively delighted by the unusual magical displays. We'll integrate these findings into the third task modifications, Crouch informed them. The maze will be designed to test your individual skills while accommodating the bond's natural tendencies. As they walked back to the castle, Celestine seemed pleased with the results. The bond is stabilizing faster than I anticipated, she told them. By this time next week, you should be able to function almost normally, with just the base protective connection remaining. Will we still feel each other's emotions? Harry asked, not entirely sure whether he wanted the answer to be yes or no. To some degree, she confirmed. That aspect of the bond tends to persist, though you'll develop better control over what filters through. Dinner that evening was in the Great Hall, at the Ravenclaw table as previously arranged. Harry felt somewhat out of place among Fleur's schoolmates, but they treated him with polite curiosity rather than the intense scrutiny he'd faced from his own house. They are more reserved by nature, Fleur explained as she introduced him to her friends. Less prone to dramatic reactions. One of the Beauxbatons students, a tall girl named Claudette, spoke excellent English and helped translate for those whose language skills were more limited. Through this multilingual conversation, Harry gained new insights into Fleur herself, how she was viewed by her peers, her academic strengths, and the respect she commanded despite sometimes being socially distant. Fleur has always been driven, Claudette told him. Top of every class, but not always, how do you say, approachable. I was focused on my studies, Fleur defended herself, though without real irritation. And dealing with the attention my heritage brings is exhausting. Harry could certainly understand that sentiment. As dinner concluded, Professor McGonagall approached their table. Mr. Potter, Miss Delacour. The headmaster would like to see you in his office. Madame Celestine is already waiting there. Something in her tone suggested this wasn't a routine follow-up. Harry and Fleur exchanged concerned glances before following her through the castle. In Dumbledore's office, they found not just Celestine but also Madame Moody and Snape, the latter looking particularly sour even by his standards. Ah, thank you for joining us, Dumbledore greeted them, gesturing to two empty chairs. I apologize for interrupting your evening, but a matter has arisen that may connect to your situation. What kind of matter? Harry asked warily. Dumbledore's expression grew serious. Professor Moody has been monitoring certain, unusual magical signatures around the castle since your name emerged from the Goblet of Fire. Today, he detected a significant disruption in those patterns, coinciding with your magical assessment on the Quidditch pitch. What does that mean? Fleur asked, automatically shifting closer to Harry. It means, Moody growled, his magical eye spinning wildly, that whoever put Potter's name in the goblet was watching today. And they weren't happy with what they saw. We believe, Dumbledore continued more diplomatically, that your claiming bond may have significantly disrupted someone's plans regarding the tournament. Professor Snape has been brewing detection potions to help us identify any magical tampering. Snape's lip curled slightly. The bond appears to have created an unexpected magical barrier around Potter. Certain influences that might have affected him are now being deflected. Harry processed this information slowly. You're saying someone was planning to use the tournament to get to me somehow, and now they can't because of the claiming? That is our working theory, Dumbledore confirmed. Though we lack definitive proof. Which is why you need to maintain constant vigilance. Moody barked suddenly, making both Harry and Fleur jump. This bond may offer protection, but it also makes you a visible target. Whoever's behind this will be looking for ways around it. Celestine, who had remained silent until now, fixed Dumbledore with a penetrating gaze. You have suspected outside interference in the tournament from the beginning, have you not, Albus? I have had concerns, the headmaster acknowledged carefully. Yet you allowed it to proceed, she observed, her ancient eyes narrowing. With children participating. I had my reasons, Dumbledore replied, matching her gaze steadily. And measures in place to ensure safety. Clearly insufficient ones, she retorted, if my granddaughter's claiming magic provides better protection than your preparations. The tension between the two powerful magical beings crackled in the air until Snape cleared his throat. If I may, he said with unusual civility, the claiming bond, while apparently beneficial in this instance, creates its own vulnerabilities. Magical connections can be exploited, particularly when newly formed. What do you mean, Professor? Hermione asked, speaking up for the first time. Harry startled slightly, not having realized that Ron and Hermione were also present, sitting quietly in the corner of the office. I mean, Miss Granger, Snape replied with strained patience, that a determined dark wizard might find ways to use the bond against both participants rather than merely bypassing it. Which is why, Dumbledore interjected smoothly, we must take additional precautions as the third task approaches. The meeting continued with detailed security discussions, including stronger monitoring charms, restricted access to certain parts of the castle, and magical safeguards specifically designed to complement the claiming bond rather than interfere with it. As they finally left Dumbledore's office well after curfew, Harry felt the weight of new concerns alongside the ongoing challenges of the bond itself. Someone had deliberately entered him in the tournament with apparently malicious intent, and now that same someone was watching, adapting, planning. You're worried, Fleur said quietly as they walked back toward the room of requirement, where they would spend one more night before attempting to return to their regular dormitories. Aren't you? Harry asked. Yes, she admitted. But also. She hesitated, searching for the right words. Prepared. The claiming bond was unexpected, but perhaps it was also fortunate timing. Magical protection when I might need it most, Harry murmured, remembering Hermione's research. Precisely. Fleur's hand brushed against his briefly. Whatever threat exists, we face it together now. That night, as Harry lay in bed staring at the ceiling of the room of requirement, he reflected on how drastically his tournament experience had changed. He'd entered as an unwilling solo competitor, facing dangers alone while enduring the school's suspicion and ridicule. Now he had an unexpected ally bound to him by ancient magic, a powerful witch who, just days ago, had barely acknowledged his existence, and who now stood ready to defend him against unknown threats. Life at Hogwarts had never followed predictable patterns, but this development exceeded even his considerable experience with magical surprises. The following days established new routines as Harry and Fleur adapted to their bond while maintaining their separate lives. After 3 nights in the room of requirement, they successfully transitioned back to their regular sleeping arrangements, Harry in Gryffindor Tower and Fleur in the Beauxbatons carriage. The distance strained the bond initially, causing both to experience restless sleep, but Celestine's guidance helped them adjust. Focus on the connection before sleeping, she instructed. Acknowledge it, affirm it, then allow it to stretch. The magic will accommodate your intent if you approach it correctly. By the end of the week, they could maintain comfortable separation for several hours at a time, though they still coordinated their schedules to cross paths between classes and at meals. The special staircases Hogwarts had created remained, providing convenient meeting points throughout the day. The school's reaction evolved from initial shock and fascination to something approaching normalized acceptance. Harry still caught whispers and stares, but the constant scrutiny gradually diminished. Even the Slytherins, after Malfoy's humbling encounter with Fleur, kept their distance and limited their commentary to occasional snide remarks about Potter's creature complication. Rita Skeeter, though banned from the grounds, managed to publish 2 more articles about the claiming, each more sensationalized than the last. Her latest piece suggested that Veela magic was influencing tournament judging decisions, prompting a formal response from the Department of International Magical Cooperation denouncing her claims as baseless and potentially harmful to international wizarding relations. She's desperate for angles now, Hermione observed over breakfast one morning, scanning the Prophet's latest offering. The public's losing interest in the claiming story as it becomes clear nothing scandalous is happening. Thank Merlin for that, Harry muttered, reaching for the marmalade. I've had enough public interest to last a lifetime. Across the table, Ron was engaged in animated discussion with Celestine, who had taken to joining the Gryffindor table regularly despite having her own accommodations near the Beauxbatons carriage. Their chess rivalry had evolved into a genuine friendship, with the ancient Veela apparently finding Ron's strategic mind and straightforward manner refreshing. Your Weasley gambit has potential, she was telling him, but the execution requires refinement. The sacrifice must appear more threatening to be convincing. I was thinking of modifying it with a delayed night maneuver, Ron replied, sketching chess positions on a napkin. Force a defensive response before revealing the actual trap. Harry marveled at their unlikely connection. Ron, who had initially been so intimidated by Fleur's allure that he could barely speak in her presence, now conversed easily with her full Veela grandmother about complex chess strategy. Fleur, seated beside Harry as had become their custom at Gryffindor meals, noticed his observation and smiled. Grandmere rarely finds humans who interest her intellectually, she remarked quietly. Your friend has impressed her. Ron's brilliant at chess, Harry replied. Always has been, though people sometimes don't notice his strategic skills because of his other qualities. His loyalty to you is admirable, Fleur acknowledged. I misjudged him initially. And you, she added, a hint of color touching her cheeks. I was dismissive when we first met. You called me a little boy, Harry reminded her with a wry smile. And you proved me wrong by outflying a dragon, she countered. Then again by saving my sister without hesitation. Her expression softened. The claiming merely confirmed what your actions had already demonstrated. Before Harry could respond to this unexpectedly meaningful observation, the morning post arrived in a flurry of owls. A handsome tawny owl landed in front of Fleur, carrying a letter bearing the Delacour family seal. From my parents, she explained, opening it quickly. As she read, her expression shifted from interest to concern. What is it? Harry asked, noticing the change. Fleur hesitated, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. They've been investigating the tournament situation through Father's ministry connections, she explained quietly. There are disturbing rumors about increased dark activity in Britain. What kind of dark activity? Disappearances. Former Death Eaters moving secretly. And, she lowered her voice further, reports of a disturbance at Azkaban, though the British ministry has denied any breach. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Your parents think this connects to the tournament somehow. They think someone entered your name as part of a larger plan, Fleur confirmed. And that plan may involve. She trailed off, but Harry finished the thought. Voldemort. Even whispered, the name caused nearby students to flinch. Fleur, however, merely nodded grimly. We should tell Dumbledore, Harry said immediately. Father has already contacted him directly, Fleur assured him. But he wanted us to be aware as well. She folded the letter carefully. The claiming bond may have interfered with whatever was planned for the third task, but that doesn't mean the threat has disappeared. The sobering news cast a shadow over breakfast, though they kept the information between themselves. When they shared it with Ron and Hermione later in private, their reactions were predictably different, Hermione immediately wanting to research historical patterns of dark wizard activity, while Ron focused on practical security concerns. If someone's targeting Harry through the tournament, the third task is their last chance, he pointed out. We need to prepare for anything. My thoughts exactly, agreed a gruff voice from behind them. They whirled to find Professor Moody standing in the corridor, his magical eye swiveling wildly. Constant vigilance. You four, my office, now. Once inside Moody's cluttered office, with its assortment of dark detectors and security devices, the grizzled ex-Auror wasted no time. Dumbledore told me about Delacour's letter, he growled. Confirms my own intelligence. Something's brewing, and the tournament's finale is likely the trigger point. What do you suggest, Professor? Hermione asked anxiously. Training, Moody replied bluntly. Potter and Delacour need to be ready for more than just tournament challenges. The claiming bond gives you an advantage, time to learn how to use it properly. Use it how? Harry asked. Tactically, Moody barked. Veela magic has offensive capabilities most wizards never encounter. Combined with your own talents, Potter, it could be formidable. Fleur looked surprised. You're suggesting we develop combat applications for the claiming bond? Precisely, Moody confirmed, his scarred face twisting into what might have been a smile. Starting today. I've cleared it with Dumbledore and Madame Maxime, you'll have special training sessions with me 3 evenings a week until the third task. What about us? Ron asked, gesturing to himself and Hermione. Moody's magical eye fixed on him. Support team. Granger's research skills and your strategic mind, Weasley. You'll help analyze the training results and identify the most effective combinations. Thus began an intense new phase of preparation. Alongside their regular classes and standard tournament practice, Harry and Fleur now spent hours with Moody, exploring how their magically linked powers could function in combat situations. The claiming bond continued to evolve, becoming less restrictive in terms of proximity while deepening in other ways. The emotional connection strengthened, allowing them to sense not just general feelings but specific reactions: fear, determination, confidence, doubt. Focus on the sensation, Celestine instructed during one of their private sessions. Feel the difference between your emotions and those coming through the bond. Learning to distinguish them is the first step toward controlling what you share. Harry found this particularly challenging. His natural inclination toward emotional privacy clashed with the bond's tendency toward openness. Yet there was something strangely comforting about the connection too, knowing that someone else understood exactly what he was feeling without him having to articulate it. Fleur proved to be a patient teacher as they worked through these challenges together. Her initial haughtiness had given way to a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and the unique intimacy of their magical connection. In France, we study mental disciplines from our first year, she explained one evening as they practiced emotional shielding in the room of requirement. It helps manage the Veela allure, which responds to emotional states. We don't learn anything like that at Hogwarts, Harry admitted. Unless you count Snape yelling at us to clear our minds during particularly difficult potions classes. Fleur laughed, the sound brightening the room. Not quite the same approach. Here, try again. Imagine your emotions as separate entities from yourself, observe them rather than becoming them. Their training with Moody took a more practical direction, focusing on coordinated spellcasting and tactical movement. They discovered that casting identical spells simultaneously created amplified effects, while complementary spells, one defensive, one offensive, could form powerful combinations. Again. Moody would bark after each attempt. Tighter timing. Feel the rhythm between you. By their fourth session, they had developed a fluid fighting style that leveraged their awareness of each other's movements and intentions. Harry's quicker reflexes complemented Fleur's more precise spell work, while the bond allowed them to coordinate without verbal communication. Better, Moody acknowledged gruffly after they successfully navigated a complex dueling simulation. You're starting to think as a unit. It's like flying with a really good Quidditch team, Harry explained to Ron afterward. You don't need to look to know where they'll be. Ron nodded thoughtfully. But with magic instead of brooms. Makes sense. He tapped the parchment where he'd been tracking their practice results. The shielding combinations are your strongest asset. When Harry casts Protego while Fleur adds that Veela reinforcement thing, Voile de protection, Fleur supplied. Right, it creates a barrier that even Moody's strongest hexes couldn't penetrate. Hermione, who had been researching historical precedents for magical bond combat applications, looked up from her thick tome. There's very little documented about Veela claiming bonds in battle situations, she said. But I found references to a Veela-claimed wizard in the Grindelwald conflict who demonstrated similar capabilities, particularly in protective magic. The bond naturally enhances defensive capabilities, Celestine confirmed when they shared these findings with her. It formed as a protection magic, so that aspect remained strongest. As April stretched into May, preparations for the third task intensified. The Quidditch pitch was gradually transformed into a massive maze, with tall hedges growing higher each day. Tournament officials regularly consulted with Harry and Fleur about the claiming bond's development, adjusting their plans for the final challenge accordingly. Through it all, Harry was aware of another kind of transformation, the one happening between himself and Fleur. What had begun as a magical accident forced upon them both had evolved into a genuine partnership. They worked together, studied together, strategized together. They shared meals and conversations, discovering common interests and complementary perspectives. And sometimes, in quiet moments, Harry caught Fleur looking at him with an expression that suggested she no longer saw the little boy who had emerged unexpectedly from the goblet of fire, but someone altogether different. One evening, as they finished a particularly grueling training session with Moody, Fleur suggested they take a walk around the lake to cool down. The May twilight was mild, with a gentle breeze rippling the water's surface. "Sometimes I forget how beautiful Hogwarts can be," Harry remarked as they followed the shore, the castle's lights reflecting in the darkening water. "I get so caught up in everything else." "It has a wilder beauty than Beauxbatons," Fleur acknowledged. "Our palace is all symmetry and careful design. Here, the magic feels more untamed." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the bond humming quietly between them. Harry could sense Fleur's contentment mingled with something like thoughtfulness, not quite concern, but a gentle consideration of something important. "What are you thinking about?" he asked eventually. Fleur smiled slightly. "You're getting better at reading the bond. You're thinking hard enough that it's coming through clearly," he pointed out. "Something on your mind?" She paused at the edge of the lake, looking out over the water. "I was thinking about after the tournament," she said finally. "About what happens to the bond then?" Harry realized he'd been avoiding that particular question. "Will it end?" "No," she said softly. "Claiming bonds don't simply disappear. They can fade with extreme distance or deliberate neglect, but they don't break naturally." She turned to face him. "I return to France after the tournament. You have 2 more years at Hogwarts. So we'll be separated," Harry concluded, feeling an unexpected twist of disappointment. "Will that harm the bond?" "It will strain it," Fleur admitted. "But there are ways to maintain connections across distances. Letters, visits during holidays. The bond will adapt if we wish it to." "And do we?" Harry asked, the question slipping out before he could consider its implications. "Wish it to, I mean." Fleur studied him for a long moment, her silvery blonde hair catching the last light of sunset. "When the claiming first happened, I felt only the obligation of it, the magical imperative to protect you. But now—" She hesitated. "Now I value what we've built together. The partnership. The understanding." "Me too," Harry admitted. "It's been unexpected. But good. Then we find a way," she said simply. "The magical world is not so large that France and Britain cannot be bridged." As they continued their walk, circling back toward the castle, Harry felt something settle within him, a certainty that whatever challenges the third task might bring, and whatever complications might follow, the bond between them had become something worth preserving. Later that night, as he lay in his 4-poster bed in Gryffindor Tower, Harry found himself reaching out through the bond, sending a gentle pulse of gratitude toward the Beauxbatons carriage where Fleur slept. After a moment, he felt a warm response, acknowledgement, acceptance, and something that might have been affection flowing back to him across the magical connection. The claiming that had begun as an accident had grown into something chosen. Something valued. Something that, perhaps, might even be called friendship, or possibly something more. 2 weeks before the third task, as May flowers bloomed across the Hogwarts grounds, Celestine prepared to return to France. "The bond has stabilized remarkably well," she told Harry and Fleur as they accompanied her to the boundary where she would apparate. "You no longer need my daily guidance. Will you return for the third task, Grandmere?" Fleur asked, embracing her grandmother. "Wild hippogriffs could not keep me away," the elderly Veela assured her with a smile. "Your parents will join me. We would not miss witnessing your triumph." She turned to Harry, fixing him with those ancient, knowing eyes. "You have surprised me, young wizard. Few adapt to Veela magic with such natural affinity." "Thank you for all your help," Harry said sincerely, feeling a genuine fondness for the formidable woman who had initially intimidated him so thoroughly. "I wouldn't have understood any of this without your guidance." Celestine's expression softened. "The bond chose well," she said simply, before adding with a hint of her usual directness, "though you could still use improvement in your mental shielding techniques. Practice the exercises I showed you. Both of you." With final embraces and promises to write, they bid her farewell. As she disappeared with a graceful turn and a soft pop of displaced air, Harry felt a momentary emptiness, the absence of her powerful magical presence that had become a constant over the past weeks. "I'll miss her," he admitted as they walked back toward the castle. "She grows on people," Fleur agreed with a fond smile. "Like a beautiful but occasionally terrifying magical vine." Harry laughed at the apt description. "She and Ron have been corresponding about chess strategies, you know. He got an owl from her yesterday with a 12-page analysis of his queenside defense approach." "Grandmere does not do anything by halves," Fleur said. "If she has decided your friend has chess potential, she will ensure it is fully developed." Their conversation paused as they approached the entrance hall, where a crowd had gathered around the notice board. Students were chattering excitedly, pointing at what appeared to be a new announcement. "What's happening?" Harry asked a passing Hufflepuff. "They've posted details about the third task," the boy replied enthusiastically. "It's officially a maze, but with special modifications for you too." He gestured toward Harry and Fleur before hurrying off to share the news. They made their way to the notice board, where the official announcement was indeed displayed: Triwizard Tournament, third task announcement. The third and final task will take place at dusk on June 24th on the Quidditch pitch. Champions will navigate a magical maze containing various obstacles, creatures, and enchantments to reach the Triwizard Cup placed at the center. Special modifications: Champions Potter and Delacour will enter simultaneously through separate entrance points, in accordance with claiming bond requirements. All champions will be monitored continuously for safety. Magical barriers within the maze have been specifically calibrated to accommodate the claiming bond while maintaining fair competition parameters. Points from previous tasks determine starting advantages. 1. Cedric Diggory and Harry Potter, tied, 85 points, first entry. 2. Victor Crumb, 80 points, second entry. 3. Fleur Delacour, 75 points, third entry. Champions should report to Professor McGonagall on June 20th for final briefing. "At least they've acknowledged the bond publicly now," Harry observed. "No more pretending it doesn't affect the tournament." Fleur nodded, though her expression had turned thoughtful. "The separate entrance points are interesting. They're trying to ensure we don't simply work together throughout the task." "Would that be so bad?" Harry asked. "Working together, I mean. For a tournament designed to test individual magical ability?" "Yes." Fleur's competitive nature showed through despite their bond. "I still intend to win, Harry." "As should you." "Even though the bond makes us feel each other's emotions," he challenged. "You'd feel my disappointment if I lost." A slow smile spread across her face. "Perhaps that will make my victory all the sweeter, knowing exactly how it affects you." Harry couldn't help but laugh at her playful arrogance. "You're assuming you'll reach the cup first." "I am." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "The maze may test more than just magical skill, after all. It will require intelligence, patience, and strategy, all Beauxbatons virtues. While Hogwarts champions just blunder through with dumb luck." Harry retorted, enjoying their banter. "Your words, not mine," she replied airily, though her amusement flowed clearly through their bond. Their good-natured rivalry continued as they made their way to the Great Hall for lunch, where they shared the announcement details with Ron and Hermione. "Separate entrances but simultaneous start," Ron mused, considering the tactical implications. "They're really trying to split the difference between treating you as individual competitors and acknowledging the bond. I wonder what these specially calibrated barriers actually are," Hermione said, her brow furrowing. "Magical mazes typically use disorientation charms and misdirection enchantments. How would those interact with your ability to sense each other?" "We'll find out soon enough," Harry said. "The briefing is in 3 days." As the third task approached, Harry found himself in the curious position of preparing to compete against someone he was magically bonded to protect, and who was similarly bonded to him. Their training sessions with Moody continued, now focused on maintaining individual effectiveness while respecting the bond's natural tendencies. You need to differentiate between genuine danger and competitive challenge, the ex-Auror growled during one particularly intense session. The bond will try to prevent you from hindering each other. You need to teach it the difference between harm and competition. They practiced with increasingly complex scenarios, gradually training the magical connection to allow certain types of opposition while maintaining its protective aspects against actual threats. By the time they attended the final briefing, Harry felt reasonably confident they could navigate the maze as separate competitors despite their bond. The briefing itself, conducted by Professor McGonagall in a classroom near the Transfiguration Department, provided more specific details about what they would face. The maze contains various obstacles, she explained to the 4 champions. Magical creatures provided by Professor Hagrid, enchantments from Professor Flitwick, and potions-based challenges from Professor Snape. Harry and Cedric exchanged grimaces at the mention of Snape's contribution. Mr. Potter, Miss Delacour, McGonagall continued, fixing them with her stern gaze. Your entrance points have been specifically positioned to create optimal magical distance while respecting the claiming bond's current parameters. You will still be able to sense each other's general well-being but not precise locations within the maze. And if the bond indicates serious distress? Fleur asked. Emergency protocols are in place, McGonagall assured her. Staff will be patrolling the perimeter, able to extract any champion in genuine danger. Red sparks from your wand remain the standard distress signal. After the briefing, as they walked back toward the castle, Cedric fell into step beside Harry and Fleur. So, he said conversationally, how weird is it going to be competing against each other when you can feel each other's emotions? Pretty weird, Harry admitted. But we've been practicing. The bond has evolved to recognize certain types of competition as non-threatening, Fleur elaborated. Though it's still an unusual situation. Cedric nodded thoughtfully. Just so you know, I'm still planning to reach that cup first. His tone was friendly but determined. Claiming bond or not, this is still a competition. Wouldn't have it any other way, Harry assured him. As Cedric headed off toward the Hufflepuff common room, Fleur gave Harry a sidelong glance. He's confident. He should be, Harry replied. He's a good wizard. So is Crumb. Indeed. Fleur's expression turned serious. But neither of them has someone potentially targeting them through the tournament. Harry sobered at the reminder. Despite the weeks of relative calm, the underlying concern remained. Someone had entered his name with malicious intent, and the third task was their final opportunity to achieve whatever dark purpose they had planned. Moody thinks I should expect something to go wrong, he admitted quietly. He's been drilling me on escape strategies and emergency protocols beyond what McGonagall mentioned. My father sent similar warnings, Fleur revealed. His ministry contacts have reported increased movement among known dark sympathizers in Britain. She hesitated before adding, he's arranged for several French Aurors to be present during the task, ostensibly as ministry observers. You think something's going to happen, Harry stated, reading her concern through their bond. I think we should be prepared, she replied carefully. The claiming bond has frustrated someone's plans once already. They may attempt to circumvent it during the final task. That night, Harry found sleep elusive. He lay awake in Gryffindor Tower, staring at the canopy above his bed, his mind cycling through possibilities and contingencies. Through the bond, he could sense that Fleur was similarly restless in the Beauxbatons carriage. We'll face it together, he thought, deliberately projecting the sentiment through their connection. After a moment, he felt her response, a wave of determination tinged with protective resolve that somehow translated in his mind as, always. The 3 days before the third task passed in a blur of final preparations, last-minute training, and mounting anticipation throughout the school. The Daily Prophet ran a special preview edition featuring profiles of all 4 champions, with surprisingly balanced coverage of the claiming bond situation, suggesting that perhaps the official complaints against Rita Skeeter had had some effect on the paper's editorial direction. The morning of June 24 dawned clear and promising, though clouds were forecast for later in the day. At breakfast, Harry found himself picking at his food, his appetite diminished by a combination of nerves and excitement. "You need to eat," Hermione insisted, pushing a plate of eggs toward him. "You'll need your strength for tonight." "I know," Harry agreed, forcing himself to take a bite. "Just find it hard to be hungry right now." Across from him, Ron was uncharacteristically quiet, his expression thoughtful rather than his usual pre-event nervousness on Harry's behalf. "What are you thinking about?" Harry asked him. Ron looked up, seeming to emerge from deep contemplation. "Chess," he said simply. "Been thinking about the maze like a chess board, visualizing moves, counters, strategies. Any brilliant insights to share?" Harry asked, genuinely curious. Ron's strategic mind had proven invaluable before. "Yeah, actually." Ron leaned forward, lowering his voice. "In wizard chess, the most direct path is usually the most dangerous. The safe route often looks like you're going the wrong way at first." Harry considered this. "So in the maze, I should avoid the paths that seem to lead straight toward the center?" "Not always," Ron clarified, "but be suspicious of easy progress. In a magical maze designed by professors who know how students think." He shrugged meaningfully. "Counterintuitive approaches might be rewarded," Hermione finished, looking impressed by Ron's analysis. "That's actually quite brilliant." Ron's ears reddened at the praise. "Just basic strategy. Fleur probably knows it too, she's pretty good at wizard chess herself. Celestine told me." The day proceeded with unusual scheduling. Classes had been cancelled to allow for final preparations, and the champions were excused from all activities to rest before the evening task. Harry spent part of the morning with Ron and Hermione by the lake, reviewing spells and contingency plans. After lunch, he met with Fleur in the room of requirement for one last claiming bond calibration session. "The bond is as prepared as we can make it," she concluded as they finished their exercises. "It will allow us to compete independently while maintaining its protective foundation." "And if something goes wrong?" Harry asked. "If whoever entered my name tries something during the task." Fleur's expression hardened with determination. "Then the full protective aspects of the claiming will activate instantly. I'll know if you're in genuine danger, Harry, not just tournament challenges. And I'll come for you, no matter where in the maze you are." The certainty in her voice was oddly comforting. Whatever happened in the maze, Harry wouldn't be truly alone, not with the claiming bond connecting him to Fleur. As evening approached, families of the champions began to arrive. The Weasleys came to support Harry, Mrs. Weasley embracing him tearfully while Bill expressed fascination with the claiming bond from his perspective as a cursebreaker. "Extraordinary magic," he commented, studying Harry with professional interest. "I've encountered documentation of Veela bonds in some ancient Egyptian protective wards, but never seen an active one." "It's been educational," Harry said dryly, earning a laugh from Bill. The Delacours arrived with characteristic elegance, Apollon and Sebastian escorting Gabrielle and, to Harry's pleasure, Celestine. The elderly Veela immediately engaged Bill in rapid, technical conversation about curse-breaking, while Gabrielle attached herself to Harry with obvious hero worship. "You will win," she informed him confidently in her improved English. "Fleur says you are Trace Courageous." "Does she now?" Harry asked, glancing at Fleur with raised eyebrows. "Don't let it go to your head, Potter," Fleur replied primly, though her amusement flowed clearly through their bond. "I merely acknowledged certain Gryffindor tendencies." As dusk approached, the champions were summoned to the entrance of the Quidditch pitch, now completely transformed. The once familiar stadium was unrecognizable, with 20-foot hedges forming towering walls that blocked all view of the interior. For entrances had been cut into the hedge walls at equal distances around the perimeter. Ludo Bagman gathered the champions for final instructions, his excitement palpable as he bounced on the balls of his feet. "When the cannon sounds, Mr. Diggory and Mr. Potter will enter first through their respective entrances," he explained cheerfully. 5 minutes later, Mr. Crumb will enter, followed by Miss Delacour after another 5 minutes. He turned specifically to Harry and Fleur. Your entrance points have been positioned to accommodate your bond while maintaining fair challenge parameters. Harry glanced at Fleur, sensing her nervous anticipation mirroring his own. Through their bond, he sent a pulse of encouragement, receiving a similar sentiment in return. The Triwizard Cup has been placed in the center of the maze, Bagman continued. The first champion to touch it will receive full points and be declared the Triwizard victor. If you encounter difficulty and wish to be rescued, send red sparks into the air. With those final instructions, the champions were directed to their starting positions. Harry found himself at the north entrance, with Cedric at the east, Crumb at the south, and Fleur at the west. As he waited for the starting signal, Harry concentrated on the claiming bond, feeling its reassuring presence despite the physical distance between him and Fleur. The crowd's roar was muffled by the massive hedges, creating an eerie sense of isolation even before entering the maze. When Bagman's amplified voice announced the champions to the spectators, it seemed to come from another world entirely. Then the cannon boomed, and it was time. "Good luck, Harry," Cedric called from his position before disappearing into his entrance. Drawing a deep breath, Harry stepped forward into the maze, immediately enveloped by the strange, green-tinged twilight created by the towering hedges. The narrow path stretched before him, branching after about 50 yards. "Lumos," he whispered, his wand tip igniting to supplement the fading daylight. The maze was unnervingly silent except for the rustling of leaves in the light evening breeze. Harry moved cautiously, remembering Ron's chess advice about suspicious direct routes. When he reached the first fork, he deliberately chose the path leading slightly away from what he judged to be the center. The first challenge appeared minutes later, a strange golden mist hovering across the path. Harry approached it warily, casting detection charms Hermione had taught him. When nothing registered as immediately dangerous, he cautiously extended his wand into the mist. Nothing happened. Taking a calculated risk, Harry stepped into the mist, and immediately found the world turning upside down. He was hanging from the ground, his hair standing on end, his glasses threatening to fall into the endless sky below him. "Don't panic," he told himself firmly. "It's an illusion." Closing his eyes and fighting the disorienting sensation, Harry took a step forward, pushing through the mist. With a sudden lurch, the world righted itself, and he staggered onto solid ground beyond the golden cloud. "One down," he muttered, catching his breath before continuing. He navigated several more turns, deliberately taking paths that seemed less direct based on Ron's strategy. This approach served him well until he encountered a particularly nasty blast-ended scrut, one of Hagrid's monstrosities grown to alarming proportions. The armored creature charged, its stinger arched over its back and flames shooting from its rear. Harry dodged sideways, casting a hasty impedimenta that barely slowed the beast. Two more jinxes bounced harmlessly off its shell before Harry managed to hit its vulnerable underside, temporarily immobilizing it long enough to escape down a side passage. 20 minutes into the maze, Harry sensed a shift through the claiming bond. Fleur had entered. Though he couldn't determine her location, he felt her focused determination and a hint of excitement as she began her own navigation of the labyrinth. Strangely, knowing she was now in the maze as well brought a sense of balance to the experience. They were competitors yet connected, each navigating their own path while aware of the other's general state. The challenges grew progressively more difficult as Harry ventured deeper into the maze. He encountered a boggart disguised as a Dementor, dispatched with a confident, ridiculous, navigated a patch of Devil's Snare, recognized thanks to his first-year experience, and solved a complex enchantment from Flitwick that required precise spellwork to create a temporary bridge over a seemingly bottomless pit. At one junction, Harry paused, debating which path to take. Just as he decided on the left-hand passage, a scream shattered the eerie silence of the maze, a scream he recognized instantly as Fleur's. The claiming bond flared with sudden intensity, flooding Harry with her fear and pain. Without conscious thought, he turned and ran toward the sound, the bond guiding him through turns he couldn't possibly have navigated by logic alone. "Fleur," he shouted, forgetting the competition entirely as he sprinted through the passages. He rounded a corner to find Fleur pinned against a hedge by what appeared to be an enormous acromantula. Her wand arm was trapped, preventing her from casting effectively, while her free hand pushed futilely against the massive spider's hairy leg. Stupefy! Harry yelled, his spell hitting the creature's bulbous body. The spider staggered but didn't fall. It turned, clicking its pincers menacingly as it abandoned Fleur to face this new threat. Harry cast again, aiming for its vulnerable eyes, while Fleur, now free, joined her magic with his. Together, she called. 3, 2, 1, stupefy, they shouted in unison. The combined spell hit the acromantula with such force that it was lifted off its 8 legs and thrown backward into the hedge, where it collapsed in an unconscious heap. Harry rushed to Fleur, the bond humming with protective energy between them. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, scanning her for injuries. "Just scratches," she assured him, though he could feel the pain she was downplaying. "I was careless at the turn, it surprised me." The claiming bond had fully activated during the crisis, heightening their awareness of each other. Now, standing together in the narrow passage, Harry could feel it settling back into its normal state, still connecting them but no longer in emergency mode. "Thank you for coming," Fleur said softly. "The tournament doesn't matter when you're in danger," Harry finished firmly. The bond knew the difference between competition and threat. They stood close, the adrenaline of the moment creating a curious intimacy in the greenlit passage. Harry was acutely aware of Fleur's presence, her slightly ragged breathing, the subtle scent of her perfume mingling with the earthier smells of the maze, the way her eyes held his with an intensity that had nothing to do with the claiming's magic. "We should continue," she said finally, though she made no move to step away. "Separately. As planned." "Right," Harry agreed, equally reluctant to break the moment. "The cup is still waiting. And so is whoever placed your name in the goblet," she reminded him soberly. "Be careful, Harry." This was a genuine threat. She gestured toward the unconscious acromantula, "but it may not be the real danger." "You too," he replied. "I'll sense if you need help again." With visible effort, Fleur stepped back, creating distance between them. "Next fork, we go opposite ways," she decided, nodding toward the junction ahead. "Resume the competition properly." They walked together to the fork, where the path split into eastern and western branches. Harry, consulting his mental map of their meandering route, suspected the eastern path might lead more directly toward the center. "After you," he offered, gesturing toward the eastern branch with exaggerated politeness. Fleur narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "You think that's the better path?" "I would never suggest such a thing," Harry replied, failing to suppress his grin. "Fine," she said with a huff of laughter. "I'll take the western path, which is probably the truly advantageous one, knowing how this maze operates." With a final shared smile, they parted, each taking their chosen route. As the distance between them grew, Harry felt the claiming bond stretching comfortably, maintaining its connection while allowing them their independence. The maze grew darker as night fully descended, and Harry's Lumos charm created dancing shadows along the hedge walls. He encountered fewer creatures now but more magical puzzles and obstacles, a sphinx that posed a challenging riddle, a patch of swamp that had to be carefully navigated, an enchanted mist that caused temporary disorientation. Through it all, he maintained awareness of Fleur through their bond. She seemed to be progressing steadily, encountering her own challenges but managing them effectively. Once he felt a spike of triumph from her that suggested a particularly difficult obstacle overcome. After what felt like hours of navigation, Harry rounded a corner and found himself in a long, straight passage. At its end, bathed in an ethereal blue light, stood the Triwizard Cup on a plinth. And 20 yards from it, approaching from another passage, was Cedric. Their eyes met across the distance. For a split second, they both froze, then broke into simultaneous sprints toward the cup. Harry was faster on his feet, but Cedric had a slight head start. They converged on the plinth neck and neck, neither willing to yield. Just as they both reached for the cup, Harry felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of warning through the claiming bond. Fleur's panic and alarm hit him like a physical blow, along with a desperate mental shout that seemed to form words in his mind, "Don't touch it." Harry's hand froze inches from the cup's handle. "Stop," he shouted to Cedric, who was equally close to grasping it. Cedric hesitated, confusion crossing his features. "What? Why?" "The cup, something's wrong with it," Harry said urgently, stepping back from the plinth. "Fleur's warning me through our bond." "It could be a trick," Cedric suggested, though he too had paused his reach. "She might just be trying to reach it first." Harry shook his head firmly. "This isn't competition. The bond knows the difference. She's genuinely alarmed." Even as he spoke, he heard footsteps pounding down one of the connecting passages. Fleur burst into the clearing, her face pale and her wand drawn. "Don't touch it," she gasped, confirming what Harry had already felt through their connection. "It's been tampered with." "How do you know?" Cedric demanded, still suspicious. "I overheard Moody," she explained between breaths. "Talking to someone through a mirror, saying the cup was ready, that it would take you somewhere when you touched it." She looked directly at Harry. "He said, Potter won't escape this time." "Moody?" Harry repeated, stunned. "But he's been helping us train. He's an ex-Auror." "I know what I heard," Fleur insisted. "He didn't see me, I was checking a parallel path and heard voices. When I realized what he was saying, I ran to find you." "If she's right," Cedric said slowly, "the cup is a portkey. An unauthorized one." Harry felt cold realization settle in his stomach. "That's how they're planning to get to me. Whoever put my name in the goblet, they've been waiting for this moment." "We need to alert Dumbledore," Cedric decided, raising his wand to send up red sparks. "Wait," Harry stopped him. "If Moody's involved, he's patrolling the maze. He might be the one who responds to the signal." "Then what do we do?" Cedric asked, looking genuinely lost. "We can't just stand here." Harry thought quickly, the pieces falling into place. Moody's intense interest in his training, his repeated warnings about the final task, his insistence on practicing specific defensive spells. "We spring the trap," he said suddenly. "But on our terms." "What?" Fleur and Cedric exclaimed simultaneously. "Someone's gone to enormous lengths to get me to touch that cup," Harry explained, a plan forming rapidly. "They want me transported somewhere specific. This is our chance to find out who's behind everything." "That's insane," Cedric protested. "You can't deliberately walk into a trap." "Not alone," Harry agreed. He turned to Fleur. "But the claiming bond changes everything. If we both touch the cup together, the bond comes with us. Whoever's waiting won't be expecting that." Fleur's eyes widened as she grasped his meaning. The claiming would be at full protective strength in a genuine threat situation. "Exactly. And we've been training specifically for combat scenarios." Harry turned back to Cedric. "You need to find Dumbledore, the real Dumbledore, not through Moody. Tell him the cup is a portkey and where we've gone." "But you won't know where you're going until you get there," Cedric pointed out. "I'll send a Patronus message," Harry said, remembering the advanced communication technique Lupin had mentioned during their private lessons. "I've been practicing." Fleur stepped closer to Harry, her expression resolute. "This is dangerous," she said quietly. "But also possibly our only chance to identify who's targeting you." "You don't have to come," Harry told her seriously. "I can go alone." Through their bond, he felt her flash of indignation before she even spoke. "The claiming would try to follow you regardless," she reminded him. "Better controlled than chaotic. We face this together." Cedric looked between them, clearly torn between his Hufflepuff sense of fairness and the obvious danger of the situation. "This should have been a clean tournament victory," he said with evident frustration. "Not, whatever this is." "Welcome to my life," Harry replied with a grim smile. "Nothing's ever straightforward." After a moment's hesitation, Cedric nodded decisively. I'll find Dumbledore. But give me a 10-minute head start before you touch the cup. I need time to get out of the maze. Deal, Harry agreed. With a final concerned look at them both, Cedric turned and sprinted back the way he had come, soon disappearing around a bend in the passage. Left alone with the ominous cup, Harry and Fleur took the opportunity to prepare. They cast protective charms on each other, reviewed their emergency signals, and synchronized their magical cores through the claiming bond, a technique Celestine had taught them for maximum defensive capability. This is incredibly reckless, Fleur observed as they completed their preparations, though her tone held no judgment. I know, Harry admitted. But I'm tired of being a pawn in someone else's game. This way, we control at least part of what happens next. Fleur reached out, taking his hand in hers. Through their physical connection, the claiming bond hummed with heightened energy, protective, fierce, and surprisingly tender. Whatever awaits us, she said softly, remember that the bond gives us advantages they cannot anticipate. Ready? Harry asked as the 10 minutes neared their end. Fleur's hand tightened around his. Together. They approached the cup, wands ready in their free hands. As the gleaming trophy sat before them on its plinth, Harry felt a surreal calm descend, the same focused clarity he sometimes experienced during particularly intense Quidditch matches. On 3, he said quietly. 1, 2, 3. Their hands closed around the cup's handles simultaneously. Instantly, Harry felt the familiar hook behind his navel as the portkey activated. The maze dissolved around them in a whirl of color and sound. The claiming bond flared brilliantly between them as they were pulled through magical space to an unknown destination, and whatever trap awaited them there. Chapter 3, Trial by Fire. The world spun violently around them as the portkey pulled Harry and Fleur through space. Their hands remained locked together, the claiming bond pulsing with protective energy between them. When they finally slammed into solid ground, Harry's knees buckled, but he managed to stay upright, years of Quidditch landings helping him maintain his balance. Where are we? Fleur whispered, her wand already raised as they stood back-to-back in defensive position, exactly as they had practiced with Moody. The irony wasn't lost on Harry. They had materialized in a dark graveyard. Ancient headstones and weathered stone angels loomed in the moonlight, casting long shadows across overgrown grass. A small church was visible in the distance, and beyond it, the silhouette of a fine old house on a hillside. I don't recognize it, Harry murmured, scanning their surroundings. The night was unnaturally silent, no birds, no insects, not even the whisper of wind through the trees that bordered the cemetery. Through the claiming bond, he could feel Fleur's heightened alertness and the sharp edge of her anxiety, though her exterior remained calm and focused. Their shared months of training had forged them into an efficient unit, and now those instincts took over. Someone's coming, Fleur hissed, her Veela-enhanced senses detecting movement before Harry could see anything. A figure emerged from between the graves, short and hooded, carrying what looked like a bundle of robes. As the figure approached, Harry felt a sudden, searing pain in his scar, so intense that his vision blurred momentarily. Fleur steadied him instantly, the claiming bond flaring brighter in response to his pain. What is it? She asked urgently. My scar, he gasped. It happens when, kill the spare, came a high, cold voice from the bundle of robes. The hooded figure raised a wand, but Fleur was faster. With Veela-quick reflexes, she pulled Harry behind a massive marble headstone as a jet of green light shot past where they had been standing. Avada Kedavra, the hooded man shouted again, the killing curse striking the headstone with enough force to chip the marble. Wormtail, Harry whispered in shock, recognizing the voice of the man casting the curses. Peter Pettigrew. Fleur didn't question him, simply accepting the identification. The killing curse, she observed grimly. They're not trying to capture you, they want you dead. Another curse struck their shelter, sending stone fragments flying. Harry peered carefully around the edge of the headstone, catching a glimpse of Wormtail circling to get a better angle. We need to move, he told Fleur. On 3, we split, you go left, I go right. Confuse them. Fleur nodded, but her grip on his arm tightened. The bond will stretch but not break, she reminded him. I'll know where you are. 1, 2, 3. They burst from behind the headstone in opposite directions, firing stunning spells as they ran. Harry dove behind a stone angel as another killing curse sailed over his head. Through the claiming bond, he could sense Fleur's position. She had reached a cluster of headstones about 30 feet away and was casting shield charms in rapid succession. The Dark Lord cannot be denied, Potter. Wormtail called, his voice trembling with fear despite his bold words. He has waited too long for this moment. The bundle of robes Wormtail had been carrying was now propped against a particularly large headstone, and Harry felt his scar burning more intensely the longer they remained in the graveyard. Whatever, or whoever, was wrapped in those robes was the source of his pain. A plan formed in Harry's mind, urgent and desperate. He sent a pulse through the claiming bond, trying to convey his intentions to Fleur. Whether through their practiced communication or the bond's deepening connection, she seemed to understand immediately. Harry created a diversion, sending a powerful reducto curse at a mausoleum near Wormtail, showering the area with stone debris. As Wormtail shielded himself from the falling stones, Fleur emerged from her position, casting with precise, fluid movements. Incarcerus. She called, magical ropes shooting from her wand toward Wormtail. He barely managed to deflect them, but the attack forced him away from the bundle of robes. Harry used the opportunity to dash toward a new position, closer to whatever Wormtail had been carrying. Crucio. Wormtail shrieked, his curse missing Harry but striking close enough that he could feel its malevolent energy. The battle continued in this fashion, Harry and Fleur coordinating wordlessly through their bond, using the tombstones for cover as they tried to outmaneuver Wormtail. They had the advantage of numbers and coordination, but Wormtail fought with the desperation of someone more afraid of failure than death. Enough of this, came the high, cold voice again. Wormtail, the ritual cannot wait. Bring me Potter and dispose of the girl. Harry felt a chill run down his spine. Ritual. Whatever they had planned, it involved more than simply killing him. Fleur must have sensed his realization through their bond. We need to get back to the port key, she called to him, her French accent more pronounced under stress. It might be our only way out, Harry agreed. But the Triwizard Cup had vanished from where they had landed. Either it had returned to Hogwarts on its own, or Wormtail had hidden it to prevent their escape. Their momentary distraction proved costly. A spell struck the ground at Fleur's feet, causing the earth to erupt upward and throw her against a nearby headstone. Harry felt her pain lance through their bond as her head struck the stone. Fleur, he shouted, instinctively running toward her despite the danger. Wormtail seized the opportunity. Incarcerus, he cried, and ropes wrapped themselves around Harry's legs, sending him crashing to the ground. Before he could free himself, Wormtail was upon him, dragging him roughly toward a large marble tombstone. With surprising strength, the small man forced Harry against it, conjuring heavy metal bonds that secured him to the stone. Harry struggled furiously, but the bonds held tight. Through the claiming bond, he could feel Fleur regaining consciousness, her determination surging as she realized what had happened. Don't, he tried to warn her through their connection. Stay hidden. Get help. But the claiming bond's protective magic had fully activated the moment Harry was captured. Fleur rose from behind the headstone where she had fallen, her features sharpening into their more avian configuration as her Veela heritage responded to the threat to her claimed. Release him, she demanded, her voice carrying that otherworldly resonance Harry had first heard at the lake. Wormtail spun toward her, raising his wand, but hesitated at the sight of her transformation. That moment of uncertainty was all Fleur needed. Expelliarmus, she called, and Wormtail's wand flew from his grasp. He scrambled after it, but Fleur was already advancing, her own wand making complex patterns in the air as she cast a series of French spells Harry didn't recognize. Fire danced between her fingers, a manifestation of her Veela magic responding to her emotions. Just as it seemed she might reach Harry, the bundle of robes near the tombstone stirred, and that high, cold voice spoke again. The Veela attempts to interfere with matters beyond her understanding, it said, sounding almost amused. Show her the futility of her protection, Wormtail. Wormtail had retrieved his wand and now pointed it not at Fleur, but at the ground between them. Serpensortia Maxima, he cried. The spell erupted with far more power than the standard version Malfoy had once used against Harry. From Wormtail's wand emerged not one snake but dozens, massive serpents with gleaming scales and venomous fangs that immediately spread out between Fleur and Harry. Kill the girl, the cold voice commanded in Parseltongue. The snakes turned as one toward Fleur, who backed away, casting fire spells to keep them at bay. Harry, still bound to the tombstone, felt desperation surge through him. Stop, he called in Parseltongue. Leave her alone. The snakes hesitated, caught between conflicting commands. You dare, the voice hissed angrily. You dare countermand Lord Voldemort's orders. The name sent ice through Harry's veins. Somehow, impossibly, Voldemort was here, weak and diminished, but present in that bundle of robes. And now Harry had revealed his Parseltongue ability, something Voldemort clearly hadn't anticipated. Using the momentary confusion, Fleur cast a powerful containment spell around the snakes, trapping them in a magical barrier. But Wormtail was already moving again, his face contorted with fear and determination. Avada Kedavra, he screamed, pointing his wand directly at Fleur. Time seemed to slow as the green light erupted from his wand. Through their bond, Harry felt Fleur's fierce protectiveness, her refusal to abandon him even in the face of death. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The claiming bond between them pulsed with blinding intensity. A shield of pearlescent light materialized before Fleur, not cast by either of them, but emanating from the bond itself. When the killing curse struck this magical barrier, it didn't ricochet as Harry had seen spells do against ordinary shields. Instead, the green light seemed to be absorbed into the pearlescent energy, which flared brightly before settling back into a steady glow. Everyone in the graveyard froze in shock, Wormtail with his wand still extended, Fleur with her arms raised defensively, and even the bundle of robes that contained Voldemort seemed to quiver with surprise. Impossible, came Voldemort's hissing voice. No magic can block the killing curse. Veela claiming magic can, Fleur replied, her voice steady despite her obvious fatigue. Ancient protection spells sealed in blood and sacrifice. Your killing curse cannot penetrate it. Harry felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by reality. The claiming bond had saved Fleur from the killing curse, but he remained bound to the tombstone, and the protection seemed to require them to be separated by threat. They couldn't both benefit simultaneously. Fascinating, Voldemort said coldly. A minor magical curiosity, but ultimately irrelevant. Wormtail, proceed with the ritual. The girl can watch her claimed one serve his purpose before she joins him in death. Wormtail approached a large stone cauldron Harry hadn't noticed before, positioned near the tombstone where he was bound. With a wave of his wand, flames erupted beneath it, and the liquid inside began to bubble and spark. Hurry, commanded Voldemort's voice. Wormtail unwrapped the bundle of robes, and Harry finally saw what lay inside. It wasn't human, not entirely. The creature resembled a crouched child, but hairless and scaly, with thin arms and legs and a flat, snake-like face. Its eyes were red and gleaming in the darkness. The sight was so terrible that Harry would have recoiled if not for his bonds. Through their connection, he felt Fleur's horror mirror his own. She had stopped advancing, her wand half-raised as she tried to comprehend what she was seeing. Wormtail lifted the hideous infant-like creature and lowered it into the cauldron. There was a hiss as it made contact with the liquid, and then it vanished beneath the surface. Let it drown, Harry thought desperately. Please let it drown. But Wormtail was already continuing the ritual, raising his wand toward the starlit sky. Bone of the Father, unknowingly given, you will renew your son, he chanted. The ground at Harry's feet cracked open, and a fine trickle of dust rose into the air at Wormtail's command, floating into the cauldron. The surface of the liquid broke and hissed, sending diamond sparks in all directions. Harry struggled frantically against his bonds, knowing instinctively that whatever was happening must be stopped. Through the claiming bond, he felt Fleur preparing to attack again, gathering her strength after the shock of surviving the killing curse. Flesh of the servant, willingly given, you will revive your master. Wormtail continued. To Harry's horror, the man pulled a silver dagger from his robes. With a whimper of fear that turned into a scream of pain, Wormtail severed his own right hand, which fell into the cauldron with a splash of crimson. The potion turned a burning red, illuminating the graveyard with bloody light. Wormtail, gasping and moaning, clutching the bleeding stump to his chest, approached Harry. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe. Fleur surged forward as she realized what was about to happen, but Wormtail had anticipated her movement. With a desperate wave of his wand, he sent a powerful blasting curse at the ground before her, creating a chasm that forced her to leap backward or fall into its depths. The momentary delay was all he needed. The silver dagger slashed across Harry's forearm, drawing blood that Wormtail collected in a crystal vial. Through the claiming bond, Harry felt Fleur's fury and desperation as she tried to reach him, casting bridging charms across the newly formed chasm. Wormtail staggered back to the cauldron and poured Harry's blood inside. The liquid turned a blinding white, throwing off diamond-bright sparks that illuminated the entire graveyard. Nothing could be seen through that light, not Wormtail collapsing to the ground, not Fleur finally crossing the chasm, nothing but the dazzling whiteness of the transforming potion. Then, suddenly, the sparks emanating from the cauldron were extinguished. A surge of white steam billowed from the cauldron instead, obliterating everything around it, so that Harry couldn't see Wormtail or Fleur or anything but the vapor hanging in the air. Through the mist, he saw the dark outline of a man, tall and skeletally thin, rising slowly from inside the cauldron. "Robe me," said a high, cold voice from behind the steam. Wormtail, sobbing and moaning, still cradling his mutilated arm, scrambled to pick up the black robes from the ground and approached the figure in the cauldron with them. One-handed, trembling uncontrollably, he pulled the robes over his master's head. The thin man stepped out of the cauldron, staring at Harry with a face that had haunted his nightmares, whiter than a skull, with wide, livid scarlet eyes and a nose that was flat as a snake's with slits for nostrils. Lord Voldemort had risen again. Harry felt the claiming bond pulse with Fleur's horror and determination. She had reached the edge of the steam cloud, wand raised, but even through their connection, Harry could sense her uncertainty. This was magic beyond what either of them had prepared for, dark and ancient and terrible. Voldemort examined his own body, his hands, his arms, his face, with an expression of delighted disbelief. He drew a wand from Wormtail's robes and caressed it gently, then pointed it at the sobbing man at his feet. "Your arm, Wormtail," he said softly. "Oh, master, thank you, master." Wormtail extended his bleeding stump. "The other arm, Wormtail." "Master, please, please." Voldemort bent down and pulled out Wormtail's left arm, forcing the sleeve of his robes up past his elbow. Harry saw something upon the skin there, a vivid red tattoo, a skull with a snake protruding from its mouth. The dark mark. Voldemort pressed his long, white forefinger to the brand, and Wormtail howled in pain. The scar on Harry's forehead burned savagely, and through the claiming bond, he felt Fleur's answering surge of protective magic. The bond was attempting to shield him from the pain, but Voldemort's magic was too powerful, too directly connected to him. The air was suddenly filled with the swishing sounds of cloaks. Between graves, behind the yew tree, in every shadowy space, wizards were operating. All of them were hooded and masked, and all of them were moving slowly, cautiously, as though they could hardly believe their eyes. Death Eaters. Voldemort's followers had returned. One by one, they approached, falling to their knees and kissing the hem of Voldemort's robes before backing away to form a silent circle around the tombstone where Harry was bound, the cauldron, and Voldemort himself. From her position at the edge of the clearing, partially concealed by a tilted gravestone, Fleur watched in horror. Through their bond, Harry could feel her calculating odds, searching for an opportunity to free him without getting them both killed instantly. He tried to project a warning, "Don't attack yet. Wait for the right moment." Voldemort began addressing his followers, berating them for their years of absence, for believing him dead, for continuing their lives without searching for him. He rewarded Wormtail's service with a magical silver hand to replace the one he had sacrificed, then turned his attention back to Harry. "You stand, Harry Potter, upon the remains of my late father," Voldemort said softly, approaching the tombstone. "A muggle and a fool. Very like your dear mother. But they both had their uses, did they not? Your mother died to defend you as a child, and I killed my father, and see how useful he has proved himself, in death." Voldemort continued his monologue, explaining how he had arranged for Harry's name to be entered in the Triwizard Tournament, how he had used a faithful servant at Hogwarts to ensure Harry would reach the cup first, how all had proceeded according to plan until the Veela, Voldemort said softly, his red eyes gleaming. "An unexpected complication. The claiming bond, ancient magic I had not accounted for." He addressed his Death Eaters. "Our young friend is not alone tonight, my faithful servants. He brings a protector. Step forward, girl. Show yourself to Lord Voldemort." Through the bond, Harry frantically urged Fleur to stay hidden, but either his message didn't translate clearly or she had made her own decision. With graceful determination, she emerged from behind the headstone, her wand held ready and her features still showing traces of her Veela transformation. "A quarter Veela, I believe," Voldemort observed, studying her with clinical interest. "Beauxbatons champion. How curious that ancient creature magic should interfere with my carefully laid plans." "It did more than interfere," Fleur replied, her voice steady despite the terror Harry could feel flowing through their bond. "It protected him from whatever influence you tried to exert throughout the year." Voldemort's lipless mouth curved into a cold smile. "Clever girl. Indeed, my servant reported difficulties in guiding Potter as planned, subtle resistances to magical suggestion, unexpected aversions to certain potions. Your claiming bond created obstacles." Harry's mind raced. Magical suggestions? Potions? Someone at Hogwarts had been attempting to control him throughout the year, and the claiming bond had provided protection he hadn't even realized he needed. "And now," Voldemort continued, "you believe this bond will save you both." He laughed, a high, cold sound that raised goosebumps on Harry's arms. "I witnessed your little display earlier, impressive that creature magic can deflect even Avada Kedavra. But it has limitations, does it not? It cannot protect both of you simultaneously. A tactical problem." With frightening speed, Voldemort raised his wand. Crucio. The curse struck Fleur before she could raise a shield. She collapsed to the ground, screaming in agony as the torture curse tore through her. Through their bond, Harry felt echoes of her pain, muted but still terrible, like flames licking at the edges of his consciousness. "Stop," he shouted, struggling against his bonds. "Stop it." Voldemort lifted the curse, leaving Fleur gasping on the ground. "Interesting," he remarked. "The bond allows you to share her pain, but not completely. Another limitation." He turned back to Harry, red eyes gleaming with malice. "I had planned a proper duel, Potter. To demonstrate to my faithful Death Eaters that your survival as an infant was merely lucky chance. But your Veela complicates matters." He tapped his wand thoughtfully against his palm. "Perhaps a demonstration of a different kind is in order." Fleur was struggling to her feet, using a headstone for support. Through their bond, Harry could feel her gathering her strength, drawing not only on her magical reserves but on the Veela heritage that flowed in her blood. "I know what you're thinking, girl," Voldemort said, turning to her. "You believe your claiming bond gives you power against me. Perhaps it does, in limited ways. But Lord Voldemort has studied magics beyond your comprehension. I know exactly how to counter such primitive protections. With a casual flick of his wand, Voldemort conjured a gleaming silver knife that hovered in the air before him. Your bond was sealed when Potter's blood interacted with your Veela magic, he observed. A protection based in blood. But what happens, I wonder, when that same blood serves two masters? Harry felt a chill of understanding. Voldemort now shared his blood, the blood that had helped create the claiming bond. No, he whispered, renewing his struggles against the tombstone's bonds. Yes, Harry, Voldemort said softly. I believe your blood in my veins creates a connection to your Veela's magic. Not enough to command it, perhaps, but enough to neutralize certain aspects. He gestured toward the hovering knife. Shall we test my theory? The silver knife flew through the air toward Fleur, who managed to deflect it with a hasty shield charm. But Voldemort had anticipated this, and the knife's path was merely a distraction. His true attack came in the form of an invisible force that slammed into Fleur, throwing her backward against a tombstone with enough power to crack the stone. Harry felt her pain lance through their bond, sharper than before. Whatever Voldemort had done was affecting the claiming bond's protective capabilities. You see, Voldemort said triumphantly to his assembled Death Eaters. Even the ancient magics of magical creatures cannot stand against Lord Voldemort's power. I have transcended such limitations. Fleur rose again, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, her wand still clutched tightly in her hand. Through their bond, Harry felt not defeat but a surge of fierce determination. You understand nothing about Veela magic, she said, her voice carrying that resonant quality that signaled her heritage emerging more strongly. It isn't just about blood or protection spells. As she spoke, something remarkable happened. The air around her began to shimmer with heat, and small flames danced along her fingertips. Her features sharpened further, taking on more avian characteristics, and when she spoke again, her voice carried power that seemed to vibrate in the very stones of the graveyard. Veela magic is about fire and transformation, she continued. About bonds that transcend physical limitations. The flames spreading from her hands grew larger, brighter, taking on a silvery blue hue that reminded Harry of the claiming's initial manifestation. Through their bond, he felt her drawing on reserves of magic he hadn't known she possessed, ancient knowledge passed down through generations of her Veela ancestors. Voldemort's expression shifted from triumph to wariness. Enough of this display, he snapped, raising his wand. Avada Kedavra. The green light of the killing curse sped toward Fleur, but this time she didn't try to block it directly. Instead, she thrust her hands forward, sending a wave of blue-silver fire to meet the spell. When the two magics collided, the resulting explosion knocked several Death Eaters off their feet and sent cracked spiderwebbing across nearby tombstones. Using the momentary chaos, Fleur darted forward, casting a powerful cutting curse at the bonds holding Harry to the tombstone. The metal bands snapped, and Harry tumbled forward just as a second killing curse from Voldemort obliterated the spot where he had been bound. Run! Fleur shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him behind a large stone angel for cover. Death Eaters were firing curses in their direction, but their aim was compromised by the lingering smoke from Fleur's fiery counterattack. Through the claiming bond, Harry and Fleur coordinated wordlessly. He cast shield charms while she continued to manifest her Veela fire, creating a barrier of blue flames between them and their attackers. We need to find the port key, Harry gasped, his mind racing. The Triwizard Cup, it's our only way back to Hogwarts. I saw Wormtail hide it, Fleur replied, sending another wave of fire to keep the advancing Death Eaters at bay. Behind that mausoleum. She nodded toward an ornate stone structure about 30 yards away. The distance might as well have been miles. Between them and the mausoleum stood Voldemort and at least a dozen Death Eaters, all firing increasingly deadly curses at their position. We need a distraction, Harry said, thinking rapidly. Something big enough to create confusion. Through their bond, he felt Fleur's hesitation, followed by grim resolve. I can create one, she told him. But it will require most of my remaining strength. When I do, you must run for the cup. Don't wait for me. I'm not leaving you, Harry protested. You must, she insisted. The bond will protect me better if you're away from immediate danger. And one of us needs to return to warn Dumbledore. Harry wanted to argue, but the strategic logic was sound. And through their connection, he could feel her certainty, this was their best chance. On my signal, she said, gathering her magic. Harry tensed, ready to sprint. The claiming bond pulsed between them, stronger than ever despite Voldemort's attempts to weaken it. Fleur closed her eyes briefly, and Harry felt her drawing not only on her magic but on the very essence of their bond. When she opened them again, they glowed with silvery light. Now, she cried, rising from behind their cover. What happened next would be seared into Harry's memory forever. Fleur's partial Veela transformation completed itself in a burst of silver fire. Her arms extended, becoming wing-like as she hurled herself into the air with impossible grace. Flames erupted around her, forming a brilliant phoenix-like silhouette that illuminated the entire graveyard. The Death Eaters recoiled in shock and fear. Even Voldemort hesitated, momentarily transfixed by the display of primal magic. Harry seized the opportunity, sprinting toward the mausoleum as Fleur soared above the graveyard, hurling fireballs at the assembled dark wizards. He could feel her exhaustion mounting with every passing second, the transformation was draining her magical core at an alarming rate. Stop him! Voldemort screamed, breaking free of his surprise. Curses flew past Harry as he zigzagged between tombstones. A cutting hex grazed his shoulder, and he felt Fleur's protective instincts surge through their bond in response to his pain. The intensity of her aerial attack increased, drawing more fire away from him. Reaching the mausoleum, Harry dove behind it, searching frantically for the Triwizard Cup. He spotted it half hidden beneath dead leaves, its blue glow muted but unmistakable. Above him, Fleur's strength was fading. Through the bond, he felt her transformation beginning to destabilize as her magical reserves depleted. She was buying him time at tremendous personal cost. Harry grabbed the cup's handle, then hesitated. He couldn't leave her, not like this. The claiming bond seemed to pulse in agreement, refusing to let him abandon his protector. Making a split-second decision, Harry pointed his wand skyward and called upon the spell he had practiced with Dumbledore but never successfully cast. Expecto Patronum Nuncius, he shouted, focusing with all his might on Dumbledore's face and the message he needed to convey. To his amazement, his stag Patronus emerged from his wand, brighter and more substantial than ever before. The claiming bond seemed to enhance the spell, infusing the Silver Guardian with threads of blue fire. Graveyard, Little Hangleton, Voldemort returned, need help, coming by Portkey, Harry gasped, encoding his message into the Patronus. The silver stag bounded upward, passing through Fleur's fiery form before disappearing into the night sky, carrying his plea for help back to Hogwarts. With that done, Harry turned his attention back to Fleur. Her transformation was faltering, her flight becoming erratic as Death Eaters regrouped and intensified their attacks. Through their bond, he felt her slipping toward magical exhaustion, a dangerous state that could permanently damage her core. Fleur, he shouted both aloud and through their connection. To me. She heard him, or rather, felt him through the bond. Banking sharply, she dove toward his position, dodging curses as she descended. The fiery wings surrounding her were fading, flickering like candles in a strong wind. Just as she reached the mausoleum, a powerful blasting curse from Voldemort himself struck nearby, sending stone fragments flying in all directions. Fleur's transformation collapsed completely, and she fell the last few feet, Harry lunging forward to catch her. Got you, he gasped as they tumbled together behind the mausoleum, momentarily sheltered from the barrage of curses. Fleur was pale, her breathing shallow. Did you find it? She asked weakly. Harry nodded, showing her the cup. I sent a Patronus message to Dumbledore. Help should be coming. We can't wait, she said, wincing as a curse struck their shelter, sending cracks through the ancient stone. "They'll overwhelm us any moment." She was right. The Death Eaters were advancing methodically now, closing in on their position from multiple angles. Voldemort's high, cold voice could be heard directing the assault, promising terrible punishment to anyone who harmed Harry Potter before he could do so himself. "Together," Harry said, positioning the cup between them. "Like we planned." Fleur nodded, reaching for the handle with a trembling hand. Through the claiming bond, Harry could feel her gathering her last reserves of strength, preparing for whatever awaited them upon their return. "Now!" Harry shouted as the mausoleum began to crumble under the Death Eaters' assault. Their hands closed around the cup's handles simultaneously. The familiar hook behind the navel sensation of the port key seized them, yanking them away from the graveyard just as Voldemort rounded the corner of their disintegrating shelter, his snake-like face contorted with rage. The world dissolved into a whirlwind of color and sound, the claiming bond humming between them as they spiraled through magical space back toward Hogwarts. They slammed into solid ground with enough force to knock the air from their lungs. The Triwizard Cup rolled away across grass as Harry and Fleur lay stunned, still clinging to each other. Noise erupted around them, cheers that quickly turned to gasps and screams as people realized the state they were in. Harry, dazed and disoriented, struggled to make sense of his surroundings. They had returned to the Quidditch pitch, now transformed back from the maze. Stands full of spectators surrounded them, and running footsteps approached from multiple directions. "Harry! Fleur!" Dumbledore's voice cut through the chaos, the old wizard kneeling beside them with remarkable agility for his age. "Voldemort," Harry gasped, still holding Fleur protectively. "He's back, the graveyard. I received your Patronus," Dumbledore said grimly. "Members of the Order are already responding." More figures surrounded them, McGonagall, Madame Maxime, Snape, and the real Moody, his magical eye spinning wildly as he scanned the area for threats. "Where is he?" Moody growled. "Where's the imposter?" "Imposter?" Harry repeated, struggling to focus. "Barty Crouch Jr., Snape said tersely. "Polyjuice potion. We discovered him moments after Diggory raised the alarm about the cup being a portkey. He's been subdued." Harry's head spun with this new information, but his primary concern remained Fleur. She lay beside him, conscious but clearly depleted, her skin alarmingly pale. "She needs help," he told Dumbledore urgently. "She used Veela transformation magic, too much of it." Madame Maxime pushed forward, her massive form creating space in the growing crowd. "Stand back," she commanded. "The girl has magical exhaustion." Through their claiming bond, Harry could feel Fleur's core pulsing weakly, like a faltering heartbeat. The transformation had drained her to dangerous levels. "Harry, you must let her go," Dumbledore said gently. "The healers need to treat her." But when hands tried to separate them, the claiming bond flared with protective energy, resisting the intervention. Fleur's fingers tightened around Harry's despite her weakness. "The bond won't allow separation in this state," came a familiar voice. Celestine pushed through the crowd, her ancient face lined with concern. "Their magical cores are temporarily fused to prevent collapse." "What does that mean?" McGonagall asked sharply. "It means," Celestine explained, kneeling beside her granddaughter, "that the claiming bond is keeping them both alive. Fleur channeled too much Veela magic her quarter-blood heritage shouldn't have been able to access. The bond is stabilizing her by drawing on Harry's magical reserves." Will she be all right?" Harry asked, feeling Fleur's consciousness flickering through their connection. "With proper care, yes," Celestine assured him. "But you must both be moved together. Any attempt to separate you now could cause severe magical shock." Dumbledore nodded his understanding. With a wave of his wand, he conjured a stretcher large enough for both of them. "To the hospital wing," he instructed. "Severus, I need you to bring restorative potions suitable for magical depletion. Minerva, secure the school. If Voldemort has indeed returned, we must prepare for possible attack." The professors moved with practiced efficiency despite the extraordinary circumstances. As Harry and Fleur were carefully levitated onto the stretcher, the claiming bond hummed between them, strained but intact, working desperately to maintain equilibrium between their magically linked cores. The journey to the hospital wing passed in a blur for Harry. He was vaguely aware of the Delacours arriving, of Hermione and Ron running alongside the stretcher, of Madame Pomfrey's exclamations as they were brought into her domain. But his focus remained on Fleur, on the tenuous thread of consciousness he could still feel through their bond. "Stay with me," he whispered to her. "We made it out together. Stay with me now." In the hospital wing, a flurry of activity surrounded them. Potions were administered, diagnostic spells cast, and hushed consultations exchanged between Madame Pomfrey, Celestine, and Apollon Delacour, who had arrived with her husband moments after they reached the infirmary. "The bond is stabilizing them both," Madame Pomfrey explained to Dumbledore as she worked. "It's remarkable magic, I've never seen anything quite like it." Veela claiming bonds were designed to protect in the most dire circumstances, Celestine said, her hands moving in complex patterns as she cast ancient Veela healing spells over her granddaughter. "This is precisely the kind of situation where they prove their worth." Hours passed. At some point, Harry became aware that Dumbledore had left with several Order members to investigate the graveyard. Ministry officials arrived, demanding explanations that McGonagall and Madame Maxime deflected with remarkable diplomatic skill. Cornelius Fudge's distinctive voice rose in protest several times, only to be firmly countered by Sebastian Delacour's cool, diplomatic tones. Through it all, Harry maintained his connection to Fleur, feeling her magical core gradually strengthening as potions and healing spells did their work. The claiming bond continued to channel energy between them, distributing the burden of recovery across both their magical systems. "You should sleep, Harry," Hermione urged from somewhere nearby. "The bond will work better if you rest." "Can't," he mumbled. "Need to stay conscious for her." "That's not how it works, mate," came Ron's voice. Celestine explained it, "Your magic helps her automatically through the bond. You sleeping actually makes it work better because your core isn't using energy for anything else." This made sense, but Harry still resisted, afraid that surrendering to unconsciousness might somehow break the healing connection. It was only when Celestine herself approached and placed a cool hand on his forehead that he finally relented. "Sleep, young one," she said softly. "Your bond is strong. It will maintain itself while you rest. When you wake, you will both be stronger." Her words carried the weight of ancient wisdom, and Harry felt his resistance melting away. As he drifted toward sleep, his last conscious awareness was of Fleur's presence in the claiming bond, steady now, no longer flickering, a warm certainty at the edge of his consciousness. Harry awoke to sunlight streaming through the hospital wing windows. For a moment, he simply blinked at the familiar ceiling, his mind gradually reconstructing the events that had brought him here. The graveyard. Voldemort's return. Fleur's transformation. Their desperate escape. Fleur. He turned his head sharply and found her in the bed beside his, still sleeping but with healthy color returned to her cheeks. The claiming bond hummed contentedly between them, no longer strained with the effort of maintaining her depleted core. "She's recovering well," said a soft voice from his other side. Harry turned to find Apollon Delacour seated in a chair between the beds, her elegant features showing signs of exhaustion but also profound relief. "How long have I been asleep?" Harry asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Nearly 2 days," she replied, offering him a glass of water. "Your magical core was severely depleted from supporting Fleur through the bond. Madame Pomfrey says it's a miracle you didn't both suffer permanent damage." Harry sipped the water gratefully, letting the cool liquid soothe his parched throat. "The transformation she did, in the graveyard, I've never seen anything like it." Apollon's expression grew solemn. "What you witnessed shouldn't have been possible for a quarter Veela. The full fire transformation is limited to pure-blooded Veela, with partial manifestation possible for half-bloods. For Fleur to achieve even a temporary complete transformation, She shook her head in wonder. The claiming bond must have amplified her heritage somehow. It nearly killed her, Harry said quietly. Yes, Apollon acknowledged. But it also saved you both. Celestine says it was an instinctive channeling of the bond's deepest protective magic, something that occurs only when both claimed and claimant are willing to sacrifice for each other. She regarded Harry with newfound respect. You were willing to die to protect her, just as she was for you. Before Harry could respond to this observation, the hospital wing doors opened to admit Dumbledore, looking grave but composed. He approached Harry's bed with measured steps, his blue eyes lacking their usual twinkle. Harry, he greeted him quietly. I'm glad to see you awake. How are you feeling? Better, Harry replied honestly. Sir, what happened after we left? Voldemort was indeed at the graveyard, as your Patronus indicated, Dumbledore confirmed, drawing up a chair. By the time Order members arrived, he and his Death Eaters had departed. But they found ample evidence confirming your account, the cauldron, traces of the ritual, and magical signatures consistent with numerous dark spells. The Ministry, are they preparing? Warning people. Dumbledore's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Minister Fudge has reservations about accepting Voldemort's return without what he considers more substantial evidence. Despite the testimony of Mr. Diggory regarding the Portkey trap and the confession extracted from Barty Crouch Jr. under Veritaserum, he remains skeptical. Skeptical? Harry repeated incredulously. We barely escaped with our lives. Voldemort has a body again, he has his followers back, and Fudge is skeptical. Politics, Apollon said softly, her tone suggesting the word was distasteful. The British minister fears the panic that would ensue if Voldemort's return were announced publicly. Precisely, Dumbledore agreed. However, other, wiser heads are taking appropriate actions. The Order of the Phoenix has been reactivated. International allies, including the French ministry thanks to Sebastian's influence, are preparing quietly. Harry absorbed this information, his mind racing with implications. What about the students? The school? Are they safe? Hogwarts remains the safest place in Britain, Dumbledore assured him. And with Barty Crouch Jr. captured, the immediate threat within these walls has been neutralized. Crouch was the one impersonating Moody all year. Harry asked, still struggling to piece everything together. Indeed. The real Alastor Moody was discovered imprisoned in his own magical trunk, weakened but alive. He is recovering in a secure location. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft murmur from the next bed. Fleur's eyes had opened, and she was looking around with the same initial confusion Harry had experienced upon waking. Harry, she called, her voice faint but clear. He reached across the space between their beds, taking her hand in his. The claiming bond surged joyfully at the contact, resonating with relief and affection that flowed freely between them. I'm here, he assured her. We made it. Her fingers tightened around his. Voldemort? Gone from the graveyard, but definitely back, Harry told her grimly. Dumbledore's organizing resistance. Apollon moved to her daughter's side, murmuring in rapid French as she smoothed Fleur's silvery blonde hair back from her forehead. Dumbledore watched the reunion with a gentle smile before addressing them both. When you are sufficiently recovered, we will need your complete account of what transpired in the graveyard, he said. But that can wait until Madame Pomfrey gives her approval. As if summoned by her name, the matron appeared from her office, clucking disapprovingly at the gathering around her patients' beds. These children need rest, not interrogation, she informed Dumbledore sternly. You may continue your discussions tomorrow, headmaster. For now, they require nutrient potions and quiet. Dumbledore accepted this decree with good grace, rising from his chair. Of course, Poppy. I shall return when you deem it appropriate. He paused, looking back at Harry and Fleur. What you both accomplished, surviving the encounter, escaping, warning us of Voldemort's return, was extraordinary. Few fully qualified wizards could have managed it. You have my deepest admiration. With that, he departed, leaving Harry and Fleur to Madame Pomfrey's ministrations. The hospital wing gradually quieted as visitors were ushered out, with promises they could return later. Even Apollon eventually departed to update Sebastian and Celestine on Fleur's improved condition. Left alone except for Madame Pomfrey bustling in her office, Harry turned to Fleur. "You transformed," he said quietly. "Into fire. Your mother says that shouldn't have been possible for a quarter Veela." Fleur's expression became thoughtful. "It shouldn't have been," she agreed. "I felt something unlock during that moment. As if the bond was channeling generations of Veela heritage through me, accessing magic that should have been diluted by human blood. It was incredible," Harry told her sincerely. "Terrifying, but incredible." A small smile curved her lips. "I remember little of the transformation itself. Only the need to protect you, to create enough chaos for you to escape." Her expression sobered. "I told you to leave without me." "I couldn't," Harry said simply. "The bond wouldn't let me, and neither would I." Through their connection, he felt her complex emotions, gratitude, affection, and something deeper that neither of them seemed ready to name. "What happens now?" she asked instead. "With Voldemort returned, with the tournament over?" "I don't know," Harry admitted. "Everything's changed. The wizarding world will be different, even if Fudge isn't ready to admit it yet." "And us?" Fleur's question was soft but direct. "The claiming bond, it's evolved beyond what any of us anticipated. Grandmere says it's forged connections between our magical cores that typically take decades to develop." Harry considered this. The bond between them had indeed transformed far beyond its initial protective function. It had saved them in the graveyard, sustained Fleur through magical exhaustion, and continued to connect them in ways that felt increasingly natural and right. "I return to France in a week," she continued when he didn't immediately answer. "Beauxbatons has already agreed to allow me to complete my final examinations later, once I've fully recovered. But after that." "Distance," Harry said, remembering their conversation by the lake that now seemed a lifetime ago. "We talked about this before, about whether the bond could stretch between countries." "We did," she acknowledged. "But that was before everything. Before we faced death together. Before the bond saved us both." She paused, her blue eyes meeting his. "It's stronger now, but also more demanding. The separation will be difficult." Harry felt the truth of her words through their connection. The claiming bond had woven itself deeply into both their magical cores, creating a dependency neither of them had anticipated. "Then we find a way," he said, echoing her own words from their previous conversation. "Letters, visits." Celestine mentioned magical mirrors for communication across distances. "There are options," Fleur agreed cautiously. "But Harry, we should also consider what we want, beyond what the bond needs. This magic connected us without our consent, but what happens next, that should be our choice." The question hung between them, loaded with implications. What did they want, these two people thrown together by ancient magic and forged into something more through trial by fire? Were they friends? Allies? Something else entirely? Before Harry could formulate a response, the hospital wing doors opened once more, and Ron and Hermione entered, followed by Gabrielle Delacour. Madame Pomfrey emerged from her office to protest but relented when she saw Harry and Fleur both sitting up and alert. 5 minutes only, she warned. And no excitement. Gabrielle immediately rushed to her sister's bedside, embracing her with such enthusiasm that Fleur winced slightly despite her smile. Ron and Hermione approached more cautiously, relief evident in their expressions. "You had us terrified, mate," Ron said, pulling up a chair between the beds. "When you disappeared from the maze and Cedric came running out yelling about the cup being a trap. We thought we might never see you again," Hermione finished, her eyes swimming with tears. "If not for your Patronus message." Speaking of which, Ron added, looking impressed, since when can you send talking patron uses? That's advanced magic, that is. I didn't know I could until I tried, Harry admitted. I think the claiming bond helped. It seems to amplify certain types of magic when we're in danger. It does more than that, Hermione said, her academic curiosity visibly overcoming her emotional response. I've been researching while you were recovering. The claiming bond you and Fleur share has developed characteristics documented in only a handful of historical cases: magical core synchronization, emotional transference, power amplification in crisis situations. Hermione's practically moved into the library, Ron informed them. Even found books Madame Pants didn't know she had. The most fascinating aspect, Hermione continued, ignoring Ron's comment, is how the bond adapted to your specific magical signatures. Harry's innate defensive capabilities complemented Fleur's Veela heritage to create something entirely unique. We noticed, Fleur said dryly, though her tone was affectionate rather than dismissive. Gabrielle, who had been listening to this exchange with wide-eyed interest, tugged at her sister's sleeve. Will you be able to turn into fire again? She asked in French-accented English. Grandmère says it was magnifique. I don't know, petit oiseau, Fleur replied gently. It may have been a one-time occurrence brought on by extreme circumstances. Or it may represent a permanent evolution of your magical capabilities, Hermione suggested thoughtfully. Magical bonds sometimes unlock latent abilities in the participants. Their discussion continued, moving from the theoretical aspects of the claiming bond to the more immediate concerns of Voldemort's return. Ron and Hermione shared what they knew of the Ministry's reluctance to acknowledge the Dark Wizard's resurrection and the divided reactions among the student body. Most of Hufflepuff believes you both, Ron reported. Cedric's been telling everyone what happened with the cup and how you warned him. But some Slytherins, Malfoy's crowd especially, have been suggesting it's all an elaborate hoax. Of course they have, Harry said wearily. Their parents were probably in that graveyard. The conversation might have continued indefinitely if not for Madame Pomfrey's return, shooing the visitors away with firm insistence that her patients needed more rest. As Ron, Hermione, and Gabrielle departed with promises to return later, Harry found himself alone with Fleur once more. We never finished our conversation, she said quietly after a moment of companionable silence. About choices. About what comes next. Harry regarded her thoughtfully. The claiming bond had initiated their connection, but what had grown between them over the past months, the trust, the understanding, the partnership, had transcended its magical origins. I choose to maintain what we've built, he said finally. Whatever form that takes. The bond started this, but we're the ones who turned it into something more. Fleur's expression softened. That's what I believe as well. The bond may have claimed us, but we chose each other in that graveyard. When it mattered most. Through their connection, Harry felt the sincerity of her words, and the unspoken emotions behind them. They had begun as reluctant magical allies and emerged as something far more complex, friends, partners, and perhaps, in time, something else entirely. So we find a way to make it work across distance, he concluded. And we face whatever comes next, Voldemort, the Ministry's denial, your return to France, together. Together, she agreed, her hand finding his once more. The claiming bond may have been accident, but what we do with it is our choice. As their fingers intertwined, the bond between them hummed with quiet contentment, no longer the frantic protective magic of their first days, but something deeper and more enduring. A connection forged through crisis, tempered by shared danger, and ultimately embraced by conscious choice. Whatever challenges awaited them, and there would be many in the dark days to come, they would face them with the strength of their bond and the certainty of their decision to honor it. Not because ancient magic demanded it, but because they had discovered something worth preserving in the unexpected connection between them. The claiming that began in the Black Lake had been transformed in the trials of fire that followed. What had started as magical obligation had become something neither of them would willingly surrender, a partnership that transcended the bond that created it. And in a world about to be plunged into the darkness of Voldemort's return, such connections would prove more valuable than either of them yet realized. 1 week later, Harry stood on the Hogwarts lawn watching as the Beauxbatons carriage prepared for departure. The massive powder blue conveyance gleamed in the June sunlight, its enormous winged palominos pawing the ground impatiently as students loaded their trunks. The grounds buzzed with end-of-term activity. The Durmstrang ship was likewise preparing to depart, its skeletal mast reaching toward the clear sky. After the tumultuous conclusion to the Triwizard Tournament, an awkward attempt at normality had settled over the school, made more strained by the Ministry's continued refusal to acknowledge Voldemort's return despite Dumbledore's public statements. Harry found himself largely isolated from these tensions, cocooned in the aftermath of his and Fleur's ordeal. They had spent the past week recovering their strength, giving testimony about the graveyard, and preparing for the inevitable separation as the Beauxbatons delegation returned to France. "It is time," came Fleur's voice from behind him. Harry turned to find her approaching, dressed in the silk robes of her school rather than the practical Hogwarts uniform she had adopted during their training sessions. The sight was a stark reminder that she belonged to a different world, one an international portkey away. "I know," he replied, feeling the claiming bond pulse with shared reluctance. "Madame Maxime looks ready to depart whether her students are aboard or not." Indeed, the half-giantess was gesturing impatiently from beside the carriage, checking a large gold pocket watch with increasing frequency. Fleur smiled faintly. "She is eager to return to Beauxbatons. The climate here disagrees with her." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, both aware of the audience they had attracted. Nearby students watched with undisguised curiosity, whispering behind their hands about the claiming bond that had become legend throughout the school. "We've made arrangements," Fleur said finally, her voice low enough that only Harry could hear. "Grandmere has provided communication mirrors, one for each of us. They will allow us to speak face-to-face regardless of distance. And your parents have invited me to visit this summer," Harry added. "If Dumbledore approves the security arrangements." Through their bond, he felt her mixture of hope and skepticism regarding this prospect. They both knew the headmaster was unlikely to allow Harry far from the protective wards of Privet Drive with Voldemort newly returned, regardless of the claiming bond's defensive capabilities. "There are other possibilities," Fleur suggested. "My father has contacts at the British Ministry. With the proper international portkey authorizations." She left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. The Delacours would use every diplomatic connection at their disposal to maintain contact between them. The claiming bond had become a family concern, not merely a magical curiosity. "Miss Delacour." Madame Maxime called, her accented voice carrying across the lawn. "We must depart." "Just a moment, madam," Fleur replied, before turning back to Harry. Her expression softened, the public mask of composure falling away to reveal the depth of emotion beneath. "This is not goodbye, Harry. Merely, à bientôt. Until soon." "Until soon," he agreed, feeling the claiming bond resonate with the truth of that promise. Around them, the audience had grown, students and staff alike gathering to witness the departure of the foreign delegations. Harry was acutely aware of the eyes upon them, but in that moment, he found he didn't care. "The bond will stretch," Fleur said softly, "but it will not break. Distance cannot sever what we've built." "I know," Harry replied, and he did. The claiming magic that had once felt like an unwelcome intrusion had become a reassuring constant, a connection he now cherished rather than resented. Fleur stepped closer, and the claiming bond hummed with anticipation. Unlike their first unexpected contact at the lake, this was a moment of conscious choice. When she leaned forward and kissed him, first on one cheek and then the other in the French fashion, the bond between them glowed not with the fierce protection of its initiation but with something warmer and more profound. "Until summer, then," she said, drawing back with a smile that contained both sadness and promise. "Until summer," Harry agreed. As she turned to join her schoolmates, Harry felt the claiming bond stretch between them, not painfully, but with the elastic tension of something designed to endure separation. What had begun as ancient Veela magic had transformed into something uniquely theirs, a connection forged in crisis, tempered by danger, and ultimately chosen by two people who had discovered unexpected strength in each other. The Beauxbatons carriage rose into the sky, its massive horses beating powerful wings against the summer air. Harry watched until it was merely a speck against the blue expanse, but the claiming bond remained, a silver thread connecting him to the young woman who had unwittingly claimed him and whom he had, in turn, chosen to claim in return. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Voldemort's return, the Ministry's denials, the coming conflict that would test the wizarding world to its limits, they would face them with the knowledge that they were not alone. The claiming that had begun as accident had become choice, and in that choice lay a power that even the darkest of wizards might find reason to fear. As Harry turned back toward the castle, he felt the bond pulse with Fleur's distant acknowledgement, a promise across miles that neither magic nor circumstance would truly separate what fate and fire had joined. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.